Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed. Tonight, in 7 real Texas cemetery stories that happened on October 31st, we return to the quiet edges of the world, where the hum of the living fades, and only the wind moves through the graves. These are the confessions of those who tend the dead, caretakers who have seen candles flicker in sealed mausoleums, heard their names whispered from empty plots, and felt unseen hands brush past them in the dark. Every account you're about to hear comes from those who walk among the tombstones after midnight, people who have buried their fear along with the bodies, and yet still know, not everything buried stays silent. My goal this month is to reach 3,000 subscribers. Almost 90% of viewers listen and disappear without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Join the darkness. Subscribe now. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and what hour of the night it is for you. And if there's a cemetery in your town that truly unsettles you, type its name below. Because when the world sleeps and the soil settles, some things beneath it do not rest. Kill the lights. Silence the world. Take a slow breath, and let us begin. I grew up in a part of Texas where the horizon looks like a line someone drew in pencil and walked away from. Burnt Hollow sits a few miles off the highway, small enough that you can blink and miss both gas stations and the feed store. There's a volunteer fire department, one bar that pretends to be a diner in daylight, and a cemetery that dates back to when people marked graves with cedar planks and whatever nails they could scavenge. Folks call it Burnt Hollow Cemetery like it belongs to the town, but really the town belongs to it. It sits on a rise of ground smothered in mesquite and Johnson grass, fenced with rusted iron that leans like tired cattle. If you stand at the gate at dusk, the stones look like a crowd holding its breath. I'm telling this because I was there on the last Halloween anyone saw Clyde Rayner. Clyde had been the caretaker as long as I could remember. He was one of those men who look older than they are because sun and wind and worry lay heavy on them. Big hands like splitting mauls. A calm way of talking, denim shirt tucked into work pants whether he was mowing or attending a funeral. He kept a little office in a shed by the gate. The kind of place with a metal desk, a coffee pot that made coffee like a dare, and shelves full of records written by hand. He knew the cemetery better than preachers know their Bibles. People in Burnt Hollow make a game out of scaring themselves on Halloween. Teenagers dare each other to hop the fence after dark, run between the headstones, swear they heard something, then brag about it for weeks. Most years, Clyde stayed late to chase them off before they kicked over vases or left beer cans in the grass. He could be patient up to a point. He kept a small flashlight on his belt and a soft way of talking that made even the loud ones listen. If that didn't work, he had the sheriff's department number on speed dial. That year I offered to help. I'm not noble. I owed Clyde for letting me do odd jobs when work was thin. He paid in cash and advice I didn't ask for but usually needed. He didn't want me out there, kept saying I had better things to do, but I told him the bar would still be standing on November 1st. My friend Simone came along because she'd heard about the view from the hill, and because she liked to test herself against things that made other people uncomfortable. She brought coffee and a camera she never turned on. Deputy Weller said he'd swing by a few times between calls. That made the old church ladies happy. They hate Halloween as a concept and think cops are mother's milk. We got there before sunset. The air smelled like dust and cedar. Mesquite pods rattled whenever the wind changed. Out past the fence, the fields were stubble and the sky was the exact color of a bruise. Clyde's truck idled while he checked the locks on the back gate and rattled the chain on the tool shed. He carried a coil of rope even though he wasn't planning to use it. Habit, he said. You never know when you'll need to pull something straight. The cemetery looks bigger when you're inside it. The older section lies to the left, where the stones are so weathered you have to trace the engraving with your fingers to read it. Names you don't hear anymore, infants marked with lambs. In the newer section, the stones stand straighter and the dates have slashes instead of long dashes. People leave plastic flowers that fade to the same ghost blue no matter what color they start out. We set up in the shed by the gate. It's a simple building with a single window and a door that scrapes the floor. On the desk sat a binder of maps Clyde had drawn, block by block, row by row, every plot numbered, every name in his stiff handwriting. He kept logs of maintenance and funeral dates, weather notes, equipment repairs. He even recorded the time a stray dog slept under the shade of the Sanchez family bench, and how long it stayed. Simone flipped through a few pages and said it was beautiful in its own way. Clyde blushed and told her to drink her coffee before it turned to tar. By 7, the first car full of kids rolled slow past the gate, then sped up when they saw us. Clyde shook his head and smiled like he was tired of being right. The bar's karaoke leaked up from town when the wind cooperated. Deputy Weller pulled in, lights off, and chatted for a while. He's the kind of cop who knows that conversation prevents half the trouble, and a good reputation prevents the other half. He reminded us to call if anything got hectic, then went back to looking for folks who thought no headlights was the same thing as a Halloween costume. It was quiet for a few hours. A couple of locals came by to pay last respects to people who didn't mind visitors. They stood a long time and left without speaking. The sky turned black, then went deeper than black. I don't know how else to say it, no moon, the kind of dark that feels thick on your skin. The iron fence ticked in the cold as if shrinking. Around 10 we walked a circuit. Clyde led with his small flashlight flickering across stones. Every 10 steps he angled the beam at the ground to make sure he wasn't stepping into an armadillo hole. Simone walked behind him, notebook out, and I brought up the rear with a second flashlight and a length of rebar I found in the shed. We didn't talk much. In places, the grass was tall enough to brush your knees and whisper. Once something small scurried away and my heart jumped hard enough to make me laugh at myself. Nights like that can make you think you hear things. A car door in the distance can become a howl. An owl can be a woman through a wall. I'm not a superstitious person by default, but I believe our brains look for patterns, and when they can't find one, they make a shape out of fear. That's why I'm being careful here. I'm telling it the way it happened, without extra shadows. We were almost back to the shed when the first knock came. It was soft, like someone tapping a spoon on wood a room away. I thought it came from the fence. Simone looked at me like she heard it in the opposite direction. Clyde didn't move for a full second, then turned his head toward the older section. Probably a limb settling, he said, and you could hear he didn't believe it. We stood there, the three of us, breathing steam. It came again. Not a random noise. A steady rhythm. 3 taps, a pause, then 2. Not frantic. Patient. Like someone signaling. Clyde's flashlight beam searched across the older stones, over the low mounds and the cedar stumps that send up shoots no matter how many times you cut them. He started walking before either of us said anything. He moved like a man who knows the ground by heart. We followed across the grass that had stiffened in the cold. The air smelled like old dirt. The gate creaked behind us when the wind changed. The sound grew clearer as we entered a strip where the names dated back to the early 1900s. 3 taps, a pause, 2, coming up from the ground. If you've never heard a noise like that in a cemetery at night, consider yourself lucky. It doesn't sound like horror movies make it sound. It's dull and muffled, but it has certainty to it. Simone started to say we should call Weller. Clyde held up a hand without looking back. It's a prank, he said, but he said it like a man trying to comfort a child. Kids put a phone in a box or dug a hole. I've seen worse. We stopped at a grave with a stone that had fallen forward and lodged itself at an angle. The name was gone to weather, but someone had scratched a cross on the top with a nail or a knife years ago. The ground there was drier than the rest. The earth loses water different on the hill. Clyde set his light on the stone and took off his jacket. He knelt and pressed his ear to the ground. He stayed that way long enough for Simone to shift from foot to foot. Then he got up and looked at me. I'm going to check it, he said. I'll get the shovel, I said, even though my mouth didn't feel right. In the tool shed, he kept 2 shovels, a pick, and that coil of rope. He always locked the shed but left the key in a tin under a stone near the door, which is the same as leaving it open in a town like ours. I brought both shovels because it was something to do besides listen. Simone took the pick and asked if we were really doing this. I didn't answer because I didn't know. We started to dig off to the right side of the stone so we wouldn't collapse anything. I've dug fence posts, but digging in a cemetery feels wrong in your bones. The dirt had a dry crust and a damp center like old bread. We didn't have to go deep before we found wood. The knocks stopped as soon as the shovel bit into it. Not the best feeling I've ever had. Clyde brushed away dirt with his gloved hand. The wood looked old and gray, not like the fresh orange of new pine. It had long nails that had bled black into the grain. He cleared a corner and set the pick gently like he was touching the arm of a sleeping person. Hold the light, he said. His voice stayed calm. He pried the corner up. It came away easier than I expected. Wood protesting in a low groan that made the hair on my arms rise. The smell that came up wasn't rot. It was cold air. That's the truth. Cold air from the ground. Inside wasn't what any of us expected. No bones, no lining. Just emptiness and a few objects laying in the dirt like someone left them on a shelf. There was a flashlight exactly like the one clipped to Clyde's belt. Same scratches. Same strip of duct tape around the end where he'd cracked it last spring. There was the small brass nameplate he kept on his desk that said C. Rayner, groundskeeper. It had the nick where he dropped it years ago. And there was a Polaroid of Clyde taken at the cemetery gate. One of those photos someone snaps when folks gather after a funeral because they need to hold on to proof they were together. He stood in the photo with his hand on the iron looking toward the hill. The date scrawled on the white border matched that morning. I know because I took that photo when the Grady family buried their grandmother at noon. I wrote the date down for their scrapbook because my handwriting is straighter than most. Simone said Clyde's name in a way I had never heard before. It wasn't fear exactly. It was like she was waking him up before he fell too far. Clyde didn't answer. He stood there with the light shining into the hole and his face pale in that old man way that doesn't care what age you are. He reached down and lifted the flashlight from the coffin. It was cold. He clicked it on. It worked. He switched off his own and set it on the ground, then picked up the nameplate and the photo with careful hands. I don't understand, he said finally. Someone's messing with you, I said, because my brain needed a human explanation. They broke into the shed and took your things and planted them. Who has my office key, he said. Not a question. He keeps it on his belt. He touched it like he needed it to be there. It was Simone said we should call Weller now. I agreed. I took out my phone but had no bars. That wasn't unusual out there, but it felt like an accusation. Simone's phone danced in and out of one bar like it couldn't make up its mind. Then the knocking started again. Not from the coffin we'd opened. From somewhere close by. 3 taps. Pause. 2. Patient. It sounded like it was answering something we hadn't said. We stood up together like a rope pulled us. The knocking moved. Slow, like it was coming from a place deep under the ground and walking in a circle. Clyde took a step toward it, then another. He carried the new old flashlight in his left hand and the photo in his right, like he didn't know where to set them down. We followed because that's what people do when they don't have a plan. The sound drew us to a grave near the fence. The stone was newer, but the date wasn't. A family plot that had been dug and filled in the 70s, then visited less each year until the plastic flowers split and the wire showed through. The name was Alvarez. I didn't know them. The dirt there was mounded in that way you see for a few months after a burial, except this had been decades. The wind knocked the iron gate behind us and made it ring like a dull bell. Stop, Simone said, but it wasn't a command. It was a wish. Clyde knelt and pressed his palm to the mound. The knocks came up through his hand, slow and certain. He swallowed hard and looked at me. I'm sorry, he said. I've never left anyone overnight I didn't understand. Then I did. He meant he'd never left a problem in the ground when he could fix it. He had a caretaker's stubbornness. If the earth asked him a question, he answered as a matter of principle. He took the shovel again and started to scrape away the top layer. He moved like a man who had done this respectful work under hard circumstances, the way you correct a mistake, not the way you undo a burial. I told him again that this was a bad idea, and we needed Weller. He nodded without stopping. Simone cursed under her breath, then started digging with her hands to clear loose clumps so he didn't have to use the blade. I kept watch like that mattered. We didn't go more than a foot down before the ground trembled. Not a dramatic earthquake, a shiver, as if something exhaled under us. The knock stopped. For a second there was a total silence so complete that I could hear the scratch of my own sleeve on my wrist. The air felt colder all at once. The iron gate's chain rattled without wind. I looked back and saw headlights at the road. Relief flooded me so fast my knees went loose. A truck idled at the gate with the driver's door open. It was Clyde's truck. I realized we hadn't heard it start. You can hear that old engine from the church when you turn the key, but there it was, lights washing over the fence, exhaust curling, door open like someone in a hurry. Did you move the truck? I asked. My voice came out small. Clyde shook his head like he wasn't sure what I said. He stood, brushed dirt from his knees, and took a step toward the truck. The light from his new old flashlight flickered, then steadied. Simone reached for his sleeve and missed by an inch. It felt like time changed tempo, like a record slowed by a finger. He didn't rush. He walked the way he always did, steady and deliberate, toward the gate and the running engine. The knocks began again, but they were closer now and they weren't patient anymore. They pounded in a rhythm that wasn't frantic. but had a kind of insistence that pushed air from my lungs. They came from the center of the older section, then from beneath our feet, then from the Alvarez plot we'd opened. Simone yelled for Clyde to stop. He paused at the gate and turned back to us, and I swear, for a heartbeat his expression was the same as in the Polaroid. Quiet. Watching the hill, light from the truck made his face look washed out. He held the nameplate and the photo like he had forgotten he still had them. The pounding cut off. The silence after felt like a drop in an elevator. My ears rang though there was no sound. Then a new sound came that I had to feel to understand. Dirt sliding. Not much, just enough. The mound at the Alvarez plot settled as if someone set down a heavy box. It formed a shape that matched the size of a person standing where Clyde had been. If I hadn't been looking right at it, I would have told you that couldn't happen in a second. But it did. I ran. It wasn't brave. It was reflex. Simone was quicker but went the other way toward the shed and the radio. The grass grabbed at my ankles. I reached the gate at the same time as Clyde put his foot on the bottom rung to step across. He looked down at his belt where his flashlight should have hung, and then at the one in his left hand as if he'd only then realized he held it. He looked past me once over my shoulder toward the hill. Something in his face softened like he'd remembered the punchline to an old joke. "Lock up," he said. Simple. Familiar. He set his hand on the iron as if to steady it. The truck lights flickered. The engine rose a note and then settled back. I turned to wave Simone on and to shout that Weller needed to come now, but when I turned back, Clyde wasn't where he was. The gate swung inward a few inches and bumped my knee. The flashlight he'd held rolled and stopped against my boot. The photo and the nameplate lay just inside the fence in a scatter like they'd been dropped. I called his name hard enough for my throat to burn. Simone called too from the shed, her voice bright with panic. I ran the full length of the fence in both directions, then back to the Alvarez plot, then to the place where we'd opened the first coffin. The hole we'd made was still there. The objects inside were not. The dirt at the Alvarez plot had smoothed out like someone had patted it with calm, careful hands. Weller arrived with his lights off 3 minutes later. He told us later it was 3 minutes because he timed it on the dash. It felt like much longer. He found me by the gate, holding a flashlight that hadn't been on the shelf a few minutes before. He found Simone in the shed with the radio mic hot, repeating our location and that we needed help now. He walked the grounds with us. He called Clyde's phone. It rang from somewhere close and nowhere at once. He told us both to sit down at the desk and breathe while he looked again. We tried. I couldn't stop listening for that knock. By sunrise, there were more deputies, a couple of volunteers from the fire station, and 2 Alvarez cousins who heard their family name on the radio and showed up before anyone could talk them out of it. The cousins argued about whether the plot had settled overnight or if people were seeing what they wanted to see. One of them threw up behind a cedar stump and then apologized to the stump. The sun came up cold and thin. Light made everything look reasonable, which was a mercy and a lie. People say we didn't do enough. I don't think that's fair. We did what people do when something doesn't fit the world. We called for help. We searched with care. We told ourselves stories that made sense. Someone suggested Clyde had a stroke and walked away in a fugue. Someone else said a teenager lured him to the road and took his truck and then lost his nerve. These were the best ideas we had because they were human-sized. Here is what I know for sure. When we unlocked the shed to pick up the clipboard for the morning grounds crew, there was a page on the desk that hadn't been there before. It wasn't written in a rush. It was a line in Clyde's blocky hand, dated like all his entries with the time written neatly. It said, H. Halloween Patrol, quiet locked front gate. Mended section by Alvarez. We all stared at the word mended. People use that word for fences and sweaters. He'd never used it for dirt. We went straight to the Alvarez plot. The grass there looked smoother than the rest. In the center of that smoothness, flush with the earth, lay a small brass object. It was a duplicate of the nameplate on Clyde's desk. C. Rayner, groundskeeper. Someone had screwed it to a square of wood and pressed it flat like a temporary marker. I picked it up before anyone told me not to. It was cold. The truck was still idling at the gate. No matter what we did, we couldn't find the keys for an hour. Weller finally reached under the driver's seat and pulled them out from a space no hand could have reached easily. He shut off the engine and stood there with the keys in his fist, looking like a man trying to hold water. I think about the knocking most nights now. If I hear the washing machine thump or a neighbor move a chair, my back tightens. I don't sleep as easy. Simone moved to Austin and sends me photos of murals and food trucks like a person making a point about new life. We still talk about that night when we drink too much coffee. We don't agree. She thinks the cemetery is an old, heavy place with grooves worn into it. And once in a while something slips into a groove. That's her way of saying it without saying it. I think about caretakers. How they make order out of grief. How they write down dates and refill vases and straighten stones so people can stand tall and cry properly. I think sometimes the work keeps them safe because it gives them a purpose that's bigger than fear. And sometimes the work is a debt that comes due. A week after the church asked for volunteers to mow, the machine choked on the slope near the old section, and I had to kick free a tangle of roots that came up where a patch had sunk. When I straightened, I saw the Alvarez cousins at the gate talking softly. They brought a new arrangement of plastic flowers that hadn't had a chance to fade. They placed it carefully and stood back. One of them looked at me over the fence and nodded. I nodded back like we were agreeing not to say anything out loud. People kept calling Clyde's phone for a while. Straight to voicemail. If you've ever heard a voice you miss say leave a message in that steady way, you know it's worse almost than silence. The cemetery board hired a temporary caretaker from the next county over. He lasted 2 weeks and didn't say why he refused the full-time job. He left a note on the desk in smaller, neater handwriting that read, "Gate sticks. Rattles and wind. Heard tapping near old section. Probably irrigation settling." He underlined probably 3 times. On Halloween this year, I couldn't bring myself to stay home. I don't enjoy scaring myself the way some folks do. But I figured someone should be there who knew the ground. I drove up near sunset with a thermos and a flashlight that works when it wants to. The new caretaker waved and said he appreciated the company. We walked a slow circle before it got fully dark. The iron fence ticked as the temperature dropped. The sky went bruise purple again because the sky likes to repeat itself in places like this. If you're hoping for a dramatic ending, a figure at the gate or a voice over my shoulder, I'm sorry, it was quiet. Kids drove by and laughed. A dog barked and then got tired. The dark settled heavy but didn't press as hard as that year. Maybe it was in my head. I stood by the Alvarez plot for a while, hand in my pocket, the way you stand by someone to let them know they aren't alone even if they can't hear you. There was no knocking. There was the sound of mesquite pods in the wind like dry rain, and a train miles away that I never hear during the day. Just before midnight, I set my hand on the dirt in the space where the grass grows smoother. The earth was cold. There was nothing under it but earth, I whispered without planning to. I said that we remembered. I said that the gate was locked and the shed was tidy and the records were up to date. I said we were doing the work. When I stood, my flashlight rolled off a stone and landed against my boot. That little clink woke all my nerves. I picked it up. The plastic lens was scratched in a way I didn't recognize. It looked like it had been taped once. I checked the belt clip. Mine was still on me. I stood there, 2 lights in my hands. I did the only thing I could think of. I clicked the stranger on and left it glowing on the ground where I had set my palm. I turned mine off for a while and waited. Sometimes I think we hear what we need to hear, and sometimes a place tells you what it needs you to do. The next morning, before the sun gathered its strength, I drove up and found the gate open, the caretaker's truck idling, and footprints in the dew that stopped at a fresh mound exactly where I had been standing the night before. The mound wasn't big. It looked like someone had smoothed the earth with careful hands. On it lay a brass nameplate identical to the one on Clyde's desk. It didn't say C. Rayner. It didn't say my name either. It said groundskeeper, and the date was October 31st. I shut off the truck. I locked the gate. I made a note in the binder in my ugliest handwriting so it would stand out. I wrote, "Patrol quiet, mended by Alvarez. Found light." I don't know what else to do but keep the record clean and the fence tight and the weeds down. Some debts are paid in attention. Some promises are kept because you show up. If you ever find yourself on the road through Burnt Hollow late on Halloween, and you see the cemetery up on its rise with the iron fence leaning like tired cattle, keep your hands at 10 and 2 and don't honk. Let the night keep what it's keeping. If you have to stop, leave the truck running, but don't leave the door open. If you hear knocking, count to 3 and then to 2, and then remember to breathe. I am telling you this because it helps to make a shape out of it that the mind can hold. I am telling you this because there are things in the world that aren't dramatic or bloody or movie ready, but they are real just the same. Work that gets done whether people notice or not. Names that get written down in careful block letters. Gates that are closed against the dark because they should be. I don't know where Clyde went. Maybe he went where caretakers go when a place decides it needs them. Maybe he stepped into the groove the ground made for him. If you ask me straight whether I believe in ghosts, I will say I believe in jobs that call your name, and in places that remember you if you treat them with kindness. I believe in quiet that rings like a bell, and I believe in knocking that is not frantic but certain, a rhythm to tell you the work is not finished and that someone, somewhere, is waiting for you to lift the latch and answer. I worked the late shift as a dispatcher for Limestone County. If you've ever done any kind of emergency communications, you know the hours bleed together. The console glow becomes your sun. You measure time by tones, not minutes. October 31st landed on a Thursday that year, and by 10 p.m. the prank calls had mostly burned off with the last of the trick-or-treaters. We still got the usual noise complaints, a nasty fender bender near the bypass, but things were sliding into that quiet that makes you relax and brace at the same time. We only had 3 on the floor, me, Tanya, and our supervisor, Dana Ruiz. Dana's one of those unflappable people you want in a storm. Tanya, younger than me, talked fast when she was nervous, but she handled the console like a piano. I'd been doing this long enough to know my own rhythms, to understand the weight of ringing differently depending on the caller's breath. I had a styrofoam cup of coffee going cold. Someone had left fun-sized Snickers by the radio rack. The fluorescent lights put a halo on the dust above the monitors. We keep it cool in there, partly for the equipment, partly because it keeps people awake. I clicked my mic and leaned back, feeling the chair tilt just a hair. The big digital clock over the wall said 22:17. On the whiteboard, there were reminders to call animal control in the morning about a loose pit mix, and a note to return a message from the school district. My headset itched a little. That's how real it gets, the itch, the hum, the stiffness between your shoulder blades. The first ring hit like a tap on the shoulder. Limestone County 911, what's the address of your emergency? What I got was air, not silence. Air like someone was trying to breathe with their mouth barely open. You can tell the difference. Then a whisper, dry and close to the mic. I'm in the cemetery, the voice said. Male 20s or 30s. No accent I could place. St. Mary's. Okay, I said, moving my chair forward, tapping the CAD to open a new call card. I typed M whispering, says in St. Mary's. Are you hurt? I'm trapped, he whispered. Trapped how? I asked. Where in St. Mary's? There was a scrape like a hand on wood, a muffled effort like he was trying not to cry. In the caretaker's shed. I started to say, okay, we'll get someone out there, but the word shed threw me. My fingers paused over the keyboard. I glanced at Dana. Without even looking, she slid her chair closer and read the notes upside down. St. Mary's is sealed, she murmured, barely moving her lips. Has been since, 10 years? 12, Tanya breathed. After the storm took out half the stones and the chapel roof. On the line, I could hear the caller's breathing and something else. The kind of sound you don't notice until you listen hard. A rhythm like tiny ticks. Uneven like something tapping on metal far away. I made a decision. You get them help and you sort the weird out later. Okay, I said to him. Tell me your name. He didn't. Instead, he whispered, don't let the lights go out. I didn't realize how I'd been holding my breath until I felt my chest move again. You hear 100 strange things as a dispatcher. People on bad trips, kids hiding in closets from their own parents, drunk husbands talking about demons in the air vents. But something about the way he said it made my hands feel hot and my feet feel very far away. What lights? I asked, keeping my voice flat and gentle. Is there power? Don't let them go out, he said again. Please. I can't. The line knocked into a rush of static like a sleeve brushed across the mic. Then the tapping got louder, or maybe it just felt closer. He exhaled as if he'd been shoved. Okay, listen, I need you to stay on the line with me, I said. I'm going to send deputies to your location right now. Don't say my name, he whispered. Don't say it out loud. What's your name? I asked, stepping into the crazy like it was just one more variable. He didn't answer. The tick-tick-tick changed pace like a different set of fingers had taken over. I typed in the call. Location, St. Mary's Cemetery, County Road 18 sealed. Caller states trapped in caretaker's shed, whispering, possible mental health subject in distress. I hit the tone for dispatch and keyed up. 119 and 132 copy a call. Deputy Harris, 119, answered first. He has that calm, sleepy drawl that always made me imagine him bored until you saw him run. Go ahead. Signal 55 at St. Mary's Cemetery, County Road 18, I said. Caller says he's trapped in the caretaker's shed. There was a pause. 132, Deputy Cole came on. Dispatch, isn't St. Mary's fenced? Affirm, I said. Dana raised an eyebrow. We didn't send people to sealed places without checking trespass permissions, but if someone was trapped, we moved. I'll be en route from the south, Harris said. ETA, 8 minutes. 2 copies, Cole said. 10 out, the line in my ear rustled. They can't find me if the lights go out, the caller said. He sounded further away like he had turned his head. Don't let them go out, please. What lights? I asked again, pressing the phone harder to my ear even though it makes no difference with a headset. Do you have power there? It keeps flickering, he whispered. If it goes dark, she moves. Who? I asked. He didn't answer that either. Instead, like a child working up to a confession, he said, There's not supposed to be a door. Tanya mouthed, What? At me. I tapped the note field. Caller mentions she. Door not supposed to be there. You're doing good, I told him. Can you tell me if you see the gate? I see a cross, he said. And a window with the paint peeling. There's a lock, but it doesn't catch. I have to hold it. My hands are... The phone made a sound like a palm sliding across an old wooden door. It wasn't loud, but for a second I could smell something. Old, wet wood like the benches at the chapel by the lake. I told myself I was imagining it. 19, I said, signal, and gave Harris the note about the flickering power and a possible unknown female. I've got 132 in my mirror, Harris said. We'll be 10:23 and 2. Dana leaned close. Ask him for his phone number, she said, I asked. He didn't give it. Either he didn't know it or he wasn't going to say it out loud. Tanya, Dana said, pull the property card on St. Mary's. Tanya already had it. Gates welded in 2013, she said. Caretaker's residence condemned and demolished 2015. There's no shed listed. I wrote, no shed on record. Stomach got tighter. On the line, the caller's whisper went hoarse. Please don't say my name. I can't help you if I don't know who you are, I said as gently as I could. He made a noise like he'd tried to laugh and it hurt. You can help me by keeping the lights on. Where is the light coming from? I asked. Inside with you? He didn't say. The tapping stopped. The air in my ear went very still. I've heard people die on the phone. I know that gap when the body goes empty. This wasn't like that. This felt like the breath had moved back, like the sound had stepped into another room. 19, Harris said on the radio. We're 10:23. Gate is... Yeah, it's welded. We're going to take the side. 132 copies, Cole said. We're walking the east fence. Advise, I said. Use caution, Dana nodded. It was her way of saying, you're doing fine, stay with it. Tanya turned down the HVAC a notch because the vents had started to make a whistling sound that always sets her teeth on edge. Out of habit, I drummed my fingers on the desk and then stopped because I didn't want to add any tapping to the sound in my ear. Okay, I said to the caller. I've got deputies on site. Can you hear sirens? He exhaled, and for a moment I could hear the faintest wail like a siren through cotton. Don't let them say it, he whispered. Say what? Static rolled through the headset like someone had crumpled foil. It scraped my teeth and made the lights in the console flicker. In the corner of my eye, I saw the wall clock smear and then resolve. It was stupid, and if you told me this, I'd say it was stress, bad backlighting, caffeine. Still, it happened. I'm losing you, I said. Stay with me. Then a second voice came on the line. Not behind him, not like a second person on the phone. It was not far away. It was right there. A woman close to the mic that wasn't there. Ava, she said. It stopped me cold. No caller ever says your name unless you give it. We don't give our names on 911, we give numbers. We say dispatcher or operator. I hadn't said mine. I looked at Dana. She saw my face go hard and I saw her posture change, like a dog hearing a sound you don't hear. She slid her chair closer, her knee against mine. Who is that? She mouthed. I didn't answer her. I said, who is with you? To the caller. He made a noise like he'd swallowed wrong. Don't answer her, he whispered. Ava, the second voice said. It was soft, but it had the weight older women's voices sometimes have. Like a teacher who never raised her voice but didn't need to. I could hear something in it like damp cloth and stone rooms. I know that sounds like lies. There are moments at the console when you are given a choice. You can go with the thing that is real and in front of you, or you can stick with what allows you to drive home later and sleep. I kept typing. 119, I said. We have a second known female voice in line. Caller says not to answer her. 10-4, Harris said, and his voice was different. Not panicked, not superstition, focused. We're at the east side, Cole said. Taller fence. Chapel roof is weird. I'm going to walk the perimeter. Watch your footing, I said. Rain yesterday. Be advised the property card shows the caretaker's residence demolished in 2015. Copy, Harris said, doubt in the word. There's a small outbuilding toward the south end beyond the crypts. Looks like I don't know. Utility or pump house. Dana stopped moving. Tanya's eyes got wide. She looked from me to the map pinned up on the corkboard. St. Mary's, a rectangle, the chapel on one end, the family crypts like teeth at the back. There shouldn't be, Tanya said. There shouldn't be anything. The voice, the woman, said my name again like she was practicing it for later. I tried to ping the call. Sometimes you can get a rough GPS. Sometimes you get nothing. I got a latitude and longitude that put the call somewhere within the cemetery fence. Phones make a liar out of your sense of the world, Eva, she said. Come on now. 119, show me at the south end, Harris said. He sounded breathless. I've got an outbuilding cinder block. No power far as I can tell. 132 is with me. Try the door, I said before I could think better of it. Advise the door status. Door's metal, Cole said. Rusty, no lock I can see. Harris is going to... The phone in my ear made a ringing that wasn't a ringtone. More like you'd hit a metal pole with a spoon. It echoed in a place that didn't have air. She's outside, the caller whispered. Please don't say my name. We don't take commands from callers. But sometimes you do the thing that keeps them speaking. Okay, I said. We won't. The woman laughed once. It wasn't mean. It was like a grandmother who knows you're lying about doing your homework. 19 doors stuck, Harris said. We're going to breach. Be advised structure is unstable, I said, because you have to say the thing that keeps the world glued together. Use caution. I heard the jolt of a shoulder against metal. The phone squealed. A streak of cold ran from my left ear to my jaw like someone dragged a wet finger. The voice said, almost tender, You don't want to come in here, Eva. Stop saying my name, I said before I could stop myself. Dana gave me a look. Not scolding, concern. 19, doors open, Harris said. He was breathing hard. It's a pump room. No, wait. There's shelves, tools. This looks like a maintenance shed. God, this place stinks. Eyes on a subject? I asked. Stand by, he said. I'm shining light. Cole said something I didn't catch. The radio fuzzed and then cleared like someone had stepped between us, then stepped out again. Dispatch, Harris said. We got nobody in here. I swallowed. The caller heard me. He whispered, I'm right here. Describe what you see, I said. Tell me where you are inside the shed. He didn't answer. The woman did. He can't see you, she said. And you can't see him. Cole said, there's no power. It's dry as bones. How could he be talking about lights? 132, check the walls, Harris said. There's a hatch in the back, maybe a crawl space. Cole muttered something, moved. I heard a hollow tap as he knocked on concrete and then a duller sound. I got something. Feels like a panel. Rusted over. 119, Harris said. I'm going to pry it. Give me the bar. Advise, I said, because that's what you say to stay in your role. Use caution, the caller whispered. Don't let them say... The woman said my name again and added, Hush. Somewhere on the console, a printer woke and then went back to sleep. Its motors whirring like a small animal. The wall clock read 22:28. The HVAC shut off with a clunk and the room changed shape without the hum. I felt like my chair had rolled even though I'd locked the wheels. 19, Harris said. Panels loose. Cole's got Christ, what? I asked. Status? It opens into dirt, Harris said. Like a crawl space, but weird. There's a board floor and then... It's like somebody dug out under it. Smells fresh and old at the same time. You know that smell when a freezer goes out? We don't talk about smells on the radio. He was rattled. I put my hand on the console like that could steady him. Do you see any sign of a person? I asked. I see footprints, I guess, Harris said. Hard to tell. My light keeps dimming. Copy, I said. You have permission to enter if safe. Cole said, listen. Suddenly, and I did, and for a second the phone and the room and the radio were all the same thing. I heard tapping. That same irregular tap tap tap, only heavier now, like it had learned where the bones were. Then I heard something else. A soft, steady breath that wasn't the caller's. "She doesn't need to breathe," the woman said. "But she likes to pretend." "Who are you?" I asked her, not expecting an answer and not sure I wanted one. "Ma'am, I need you to stop speaking to me and allow me to assist the caller." "I've been in the ground a long time," she said. "You get so lonely you learn how to say things with the dirt closed over you." "But," Harris said, sharp, "we got walls, brick, that doesn't make sense. This is a shed." And then he said my name, not like we do on the radio. Not like dispatch. He said Eva. I heard my own name repeated in a place where I hadn't put it, and I became acutely aware of how a name can feel like a handle. I didn't answer him. I said, "Go again, Eva," he said, thinner, like he'd used up the air on the first one. "It's written in here." Cole, young enough to still try humor when he's scared, said, "Well, that's festive." "Where?" I asked. "On the wall," Harris said. "Scratched, and there's more, dates, names. I got a Mary Ellen, a Josiah, a T. Carver, and an Eva." His light must have moved. I heard him choke. It says October 31st? Of what year?" Dana asked, stepping all the way into the space behind my chair like she could get in there with us. "Doesn't say," Harris said. "Just October 31st, I swallowed again." The HVAC kicked back on and the sudden hum made me jump. On the line, the caller whispered, "I'm sorry." "For what?" I asked. "For saying your name," he said. "You didn't," I said, and it was the most useless human thing, trying to fix a mistake that maybe hadn't been his. The woman said, not to me and not to him, but like she was answering someone from a long time ago, "We didn't have a shed. We had a pantry where we kept the wheat and the bodies when the ground was too hard to break." 19, I said. "Exit the structure." "Repeat, exit." "Let's not." The radio cracked. Harris said, "Negative dispatch." There's a door." "Door?" I asked, hearing Tanya suck a breath through her teeth. "Advise door status." "It wasn't there a second ago," Harris said. "It's brick but flush, like an outline first, and now it's real." "Cole, you see this?" "Yeah," Cole said, voice small. "Yeah, I see it." "Don't open it," I said. 119, that is a negative. Back out and wait for additional units." Harris didn't answer me. I heard the groan of something old remembering how to move. The phone in my ear went perfectly still, and I realized the tapping had stopped. You don't know you've been listening to something until it's gone and the space it leaves is too big. "Ava," the woman said. "It's not tonight." 19, I said louder because volume is a talisman. "Are you with me?" "I'm with you," he said. And then his voice did a thing I've only heard twice. It split into the part that knows he is a professional and the part that knows he is a person. "There's a stare down." I can see the line dropped, not like a hang-up, like someone had pressed their hand softly over a mouth. The call timer on my screen kept ticking. The GPS pin blinked. The radio hissed like rain. 119 status, I said. Count 32 status. Tanya's fingers hovered over the muty call. Dana's hand settled on my shoulder and I realized I was shaking just a little. "Dispatch," Cole said after a long moment. We're backing out. Panels, I don't know. It's not. Harris, help me with this. I heard a scrape. I heard breath. Then the siren, real this time, not through cotton. Another unit pulling up. 10 on scene, Sergeant Leland said. "What have we got?" You and Paramedic Ortiz said soon after. "Staged. 210, 119, and 132 are inside an outbuilding at the south end," I said. Going back to my job like a dog who knows the trick even with a stranger in the room. "No power. Caller reports trapped in caretaker's shed. Second unknown female voice heard online. Advise caution. Copy," Leland said. He's seen everything twice and has a way of making it sound like everyone should stop acting wild. Calling it. "Everyone out," Cole came on panting. We're out." "We're out. That door is, yeah. It's not. It's just a wall now." 119, I asked. "I'm out," Harris said. He sounded older. We need to get a unit to sit here, and someone needs to tell the county there's an outbuilding here that isn't supposed to be." "Copy," I said. "Advise if you located the subject." "We got nobody," Harris said. "No sign of anyone. No footprints except ours, far as I can tell." 132, Cole said, quieter. "What about the names?" Harris didn't answer. Leland took over herding and inventorying. The call timer kept ticking in my ear. The GPS pin winked like a bad eye. "Sir?" I said to the caller, because whether or not the world was obeying its own rules, I had a person and that person had said he was trapped. "Sir, are you still with me?" For a long time, there was nothing. Then I heard that breath again, not his, the other. The woman did not say my name this time. She said, with the kind of patience that is either kindness or hunger, "Hush." The lights went out. The call clicked. The line died. The timer froze. It didn't give me an end cause. Sometimes the system does that, and you spend 20 minutes later with IT blaming the vendor, and the vendor blaming our network. It feels like changing a bandage on a bone that still hurts. We kept the units out there for another hour. Leland walked the fence twice and took pictures. The paramedics never had to step in. County maintenance got paged and drove out in a truck that blew warm diesel through the graves. They cut a temporary lock and put it on the gate they said was welded. Everyone had a way of explaining it that made them feel better. "Storm damage," maintenance said. "Kids broke in," Leland said. "Old map," Cole said. "My eyes," Harris said, but very softly, only to himself. Back at the office, the air warmed up because the HVAC was tired of working through ghosts. Tanya found a Twizzler in her pocket and ate it without tasting it. Dana put a hand on my back and asked me without asking if I was okay. I said I was. I wasn't. But I've checked on moms with their kids bleeding in their laps and elderly men whose hearts were doing the fish flop and girls whispering from behind locked bathroom doors. You save your own fall apart for the car. We log everything. We box the strange in forms. At 23:41, I pulled the recording of the call. Not because I wanted to hear it again, but because you do your due diligence. You redact the details you should redact. You mark the times, when he first said cemetery, when he said caretaker's shed, when the second voice came in. The software we use is close to user-friendly. It looks like every other piece of software built by engineers who have never had to use it at 3 a.m. I hit play. The green bar unspooled. There was my voice, flat and low the way it gets when I'm trying to stay calm. There was his whisper, close and ragged. And there was the other. I don't know what I expected her to sound like on a recording. People don't realize how much the ear and the mind collaborate to make a voice into a person. On playback, everything is smaller and bigger at the same time. I cranked the volume a little. Dana and Tanya both leaned in. Tanya's jaw worked a little bit of licorice. Dana's eyes were on the waveform like you can read the letters off the shape. We got to the part where he says, "Don't let the lights go out." We got to the part where he says there's not supposed to be a door. I noted the timestamps. Then the waveform shivered and there it was. Her voice. "Eva," she said. But it wasn't on the background track where it should have been. It wasn't in the same channel as the caller. It was on my side. On the dispatch channel. The software has a way of showing where sound comes from. It showed my mic lighting green at the exact moment she spoke. "What the hell?" Tanya said. "Soft." "Could be crosstalk," Dana said, even though it wasn't. Even though nothing else on the recording did that. And we all knew it. I scrubbed back and listened again. And then I heard something I hadn't the first time, because the first time I'd been too busy breathing and listening and not letting my hands shake. After she says my name, there's this breath. Not a person's breath. A room's breath. The sound of space remembering it was once a smaller shape. I stayed 2 hours late and filled out the report. We logged it as unfounded because there was no subject located. The outbuilding was to be reported to county property. That's a box you check so the world can pretend it's the kind of thing that can be resolved with a new line on a map. Harris and Cole both filed addendums. Harris kept it clinical. Cole wrote like he was telling a teacher what he knew they didn't want to hear. That the door hadn't been there and then it was and then it wasn't. At 1:07 a.m., I walked out to my car alone. The parking lot lights hummed. The flag clipped its pole in a wind that had died everywhere else. Someone had left a plastic pumpkin by the side door. It rocked a little on its base like someone had nudged it. My hand smelled like coffee and dry paper. On the drive home, I caught myself looking at the rearview mirror too often. Not because anything was in it, but because it felt like not looking would be rude. I didn't sleep. I kept seeing the waveform in my head, that little green spike where her voice lit up my channel. When the sun scratched at the blinds around 7, I made eggs and threw them out and made toast and didn't eat it. I told myself I wouldn't go looking. Not because I was scared, but because we don't go to scenes unless we have to. It muddies your brain for next time. It makes you think you're a different part of the machine than you are. At 6:14 p.m. the next night, on November 1st, I came in for shift again. Different crew mostly. Micah from IT was there early, which meant the network had hiccuped or he was avoiding a date. He wears his hair too long for county, which is how you know he's very good at his job. He asked if we'd had any weird interference. I told him no because I didn't feel like explaining weird in a way that would end with him unplugging something and plugging it back in. At 7:02, the phone on the supervisor desk rang. Dana wasn't in yet, so I picked it up. It was Leland. You want something interesting? She said. Define interesting, I said. Old man who walks his dog by St. Mary's every night just sent me a picture, she said. I could hear wind over the line. Said he thought it was a Halloween prank, but he took it anyway because he knows my wife. You want me to forward? Sure, I said, trying to sound like my insides weren't made of glass. The text came in. A picture of a headstone. I recognized the layout, the angel on top, the way the lichen made a map of places that don't exist anymore. The stone was ordinary. The name wasn't, it said Evia Martinez. I'm not going to redact myself here. I'm out of this anyway, and I'm telling you because if you ever see your name where it shouldn't be, you deserve to know it's not just you. Beneath the name was a date of birth that wasn't mine. Not even close, 1893, and a date of death that wasn't either. October 31st, no year. Just October 31st, he'd sent the wide shot and the close-up. In the close-up, you could see where the letters had been cleanly cut 100 years ago, and where something newer had traced them. You could also see, if you knew what limestone looked like after a night of damp, that the carving was fresh, like someone had scraped the crust off to show what was underneath. The dog's leash cut through the corner of the frame. The dog had been pulling toward the fence. Is this a joke? I asked Leland because she's not a person who does jokes, and that's how you know when you're rattled. You accuse people of being things they're not. Wish it was, she said. We'll send a unit to tell whoever's doing grave vandalism to knock it off. You doing okay? I said I was. She let me have that. She said, we'll handle it. Micah wandered by, mug in hand, looked at my face and kept walking. He doesn't like to be in the part of a story where people look at each other like they just saw a car swerve. At 7:19, I walked to the break room, opened the fridge, and stared at someone's leftover spaghetti like it could answer a question I didn't know how to ask. When I came back to the console, Tanya had put a sticky note on my keyboard because she thought she was being funny. It said boo in block letters. I rolled my eyes and tossed it. It stuck to my sleeve. At 7:45, Dana came in and I showed her the photo. She took it like evidence, like if she held it exactly right, it would behave. She didn't say it out loud, but I could feel her thinking about the recording. I could feel her wondering if we should pull it again and listen one more time and pretend it would sound different. At 8:03, Harris came by. He doesn't come inside if he doesn't need to. He prefers the car. But he came in and leaned on the divider and asked if we'd heard anything else. I showed him the picture on my phone and watched his face change, the muscle by the jaw do a little dance. He said, it's a prank. He said, teenagers. He said, nothing good comes from that place, why would we expect any now? He said nothing at all. At 9:12, I pulled the recording again without telling anyone. I told myself I wanted to mark it for training. Put it in the oddities folder you make for rookies when you want to show them survival requires having a sense of humor. I scrubbed to the part where she says my name. I turned the volume down so I wouldn't hear it full in my head. Do you want to know what I heard? You do. That's why you read these stories in the middle of the night. You tell yourself it's entertainment. It's not. It's a way of checking the doors. I heard nothing. Not silence. Not dead air. The place where her voice had been was gone. The spike on the waveform was still there like a scar. The software showed my mic lighting at that moment, but the sound, her sound, had been cleanly lifted out, like a surgeon removing a bullet and leaving only the shape of the wound. I closed the file. At 10 p.m., the prank call started again, because this is still a county with kids and bad ideas. At 11:10, we had a real crash on Route 7, and everyone moved the way you move when work returns and the world asks you to stay in it. At midnight, a man called to say his neighbor's porch light had been on for 3 days, and could we check if she was okay? We did. She was fine. She just liked to read out there at night, and someone had told her porch lights stop raccoons. You fix what you can fix. I did not drive to St. Mary's after shift. I did not ask Harris to meet me there. I did not take the photo and draw little lines on it and email the county asking them why the stone said my name. If maybe there was another Eva Martinez who died on a Halloween with no year, and if so, did anyone ever find her? I am telling you this here because it feels like something that wants to exist in words. Maybe that's how it travels, through names and telling. Maybe that's how it gets out. Or maybe it's how it stays in. If you ever dispatch or if you do anything where the next breath could change everything, you'll understand the part that's really bothering me isn't the voice or the door or the way the shed wasn't there until it was. The part that bothers me is that she said, "It's not tonight." Because the stone says October 30 Wern. And tonight, as I'm writing this, it's November Wern. But on that stone, on that date, it is still October 31st. I'm going to put my headset on in 5 minutes. I'm going to ask for the address of the emergency. I'm going to send help and keep the lights on. And if a man whispers that he is trapped in a place that can't exist, I will ask his name. I will not say mine. And if I hear my name anyway, I will pretend I didn't. I will go on like I do not recognize that voice that doesn't have breath. I will be professional. I will fill out the form. I will tell you that the gate was welded, that the county has no record of a shed, that the names on the wall do not mean anything at all. And I will not drive past St. Mary's on my way home. I will not. I will not. But I know the lights out there are flickering. And I know if they go out, she moves. I never believed the name Whispering Oaks was anything more than country fried drama until the night we went out there with a borrowed camera and 2 flimsy flashlights. If you're from around Waco, you've probably heard of it. It's a little churchyard on the west side of town, down a 2-lane road that looks like it runs off the edge of Texas. The church is white and slanted and so small you could mistake it for a farmhouse if you didn't catch the weathered cross on the gable. Behind it is a cemetery that dips into a field and then rises again so the headstones look like crooked teeth on a dark jaw. Live oaks grow everywhere, twisted like the wind taught them to whisper, and on quiet nights you can hear the leaves hissing to each other, even if the air is still. That's not me trying to be poetic. It's exactly how it sounds. It was Halloween night senior year. Everyone else was packing into bonfires and house parties and those trailers people only use when their parents are out of town. My friend Tyler and I made fun of all that. "We'll bring back actual proof," Tyler said, tapping the camcorder he'd sweet-talked off his cousin. He meant proof for his YouTube channel, which was mostly sneaking into abandoned barns and pretending the wind was a ghost. He had 12 videos and 60-something subscribers and the kind of energy that makes adults sigh and say, he'll either be famous or the first to fall off the roof. We told people we'd be at Whispering Oaks all night. That was part of the dare. The deal was we'd make one long take so nobody could accuse us of faking anything in the edit. One continuous shot from our car door at 10:30 p.m. to sunrise. Tyler wanted the thumbnail to be our faces half lit and scared with the oaks behind us. No screaming, he reminded me. If you scream, scream like a man. He was kidding. I laughed. We were both wearing hoodies because Texas nights don't care about your pride when cold air slips off the pastures. I grabbed a thermos of coffee my mom thought was for late-night studying and a pack of gas station donuts that smelled like sugar and oil. We pulled off the road where the ditch widened into a flat shoulder and killed the lights. The church sat back from the street with a gravel horseshoe drive that crunched like we were driving on bones. We didn't go that far in. Tyler said he wanted the shot of us hiking the last stretch in darkness, so we cut the engine and let our breath steam for a second. It was so quiet that even the soft ticking of the cooling hood felt loud. "This is the intro," Tyler said, and lifted the camera. His voice dropped into the voice he used for the channel. "What's up, guys? Halloween special. Tyler and..." He aimed the lens at me. "Evan," I said, because that's my name. "We're not here to disrespect anything. We just want to see if the stories are true." "The stories are true," he told the mic. "Everybody says the oaks whisper your name, right? Let's see whose name we hear." He used his foot to nudge the door shut, and we started down the gravel. The flashlights threw oval beams that made the dust sparkle and the road seem to swim. The church's windows were dark. I noticed a chain looped over the front steps railing, like someone trying to make the place look more closed than it already was. There was a small sign near the path into the cemetery. "No trespassing after dark." It was a cheap plastic sign, the kind you get at the hardware store, and it was zip-tied to a post. Someone had tried to make the warning stick with a piece of red tape. It flapped in the cold breeze. "If a pastor catches us, I'm blaming you," I whispered. If a pastor catches us on Halloween at 1 in the morning, he's the one who has to explain himself, Tyler whispered back. I wish I remembered more about the early parts, because I'd like to blame what happened later on, the way everything already felt wrong, but honestly the first hour was boring. We walked the neat rows reading names out loud, shining our lights on lambs and angels and little crosses. A few headstones had solar-powered candles that glowed faintly like eyes. The oaks arched over all of it. Every time we looked up, the branches seemed to point in new directions. We set the camera on a tripod Tyler had slung over his shoulder and let it run while we did slow pans. He narrated like one of those airplane tour guides. Over here we have a row from the 1920s. Over here we have newer stones. Over here we have, look at this, someone left a pack of cigarettes on a grave, respect. At midnight we broke for coffee on a stone bench. It felt disrespectful, so I kept my feet off the names carved across the top and sat on my backpack instead. Tyler kept the camera going, perched on the bench arm. The little red light on the front glowed like an irritated eye. The wind had picked up just enough to move the lower branches. They didn't creak. They talked. It was the kind of sound that makes you turn your head even when you know nothing is there. Tyler tried to joke that the oaks were reading the names with us and we both laughed too loudly. At around 1, the cold got into my hands. I kept tucking my fingers into my sleeves and pulling them out to shine the flashlight again. We were both starting to get that false bravery that comes when you're tired and nothing has happened. You start making fun of the place to cover boredom and nerves. Tyler dared me to walk out to the oldest corner by myself. 2 minutes, he said. I'll stay here and get an establishing shot. Establish this, I told him, and started down the slope. There's a dip in the yard where the ground falls away toward a wire fence and then climbs to a patch of oaks so thick their roots lace under the grass like knuckles. The stones down there are the kind that are turning back into rock, the writing fading until you're not sure if it ever said anything. My breath blew sideways. I couldn't hear Tyler behind me anymore. The flashlight beam caught something shiny and I bent down. It was a little toy car, half buried and brown with mud except for the windshield. Someone had set it at the base of a low marker whose name had washed away. I put the car back where it was and, for reasons I still don't understand, said out loud, "Okay, kid, we see you." I said it like I was talking to an actual child, not the dirt. Halfway back up the slope, I heard someone say my name. Evan, plain as that. Not stretched out, not hissed. Just the way my mom says it when she needs the trash taken out. I pivoted so fast my light bobbled and the beam ran across stone and grass and Tyler's head up near the bench. He had the camera on his shoulder now, pointed down the hill. He looked at me and lifted the camera a little like he'd caught a fish. You heard that, right? I called. Heard what? My name. Tyler kept the camera on me. The red light stared. Say like and subscribe, Karn, he said, teasing, but his voice didn't have the bounce it usually did. I stood there squinting into the dark, waiting to hear it again. I did. It came from my left, soft and close, like someone standing just inside the shadow of a tree. Evan, okay, I said too loudly. You got your laugh. Tyler had started walking toward me, the camera still balanced on his shoulder. In the viewfinder glow, I could see his face narrowing the way it did when he was lining up a shot. What did you think I did? He asked. Say my name from behind the trees. He shook his head. He was 5 feet away now. The camera kept staring. I didn't say anything. We stood there long enough to hear it a third time, both of us. Evan, it whispered, but not like the oaks whispered. It was a child's voice with that unsure ending that makes everything come out like a question. The flashlight caught the edges of a little figure stepping from behind a headstone. If you've never had your brain try to put something into a category and fail, it's the weirdest feeling. My first thought was late-night trick-or-treater, some kid braver than sense wandering in a place they shouldn't be. The figure moved like a person. The shadow hit the ground like a person, and then our lights caught his face. He was maybe 7. It's hard to say with boys because they either look like small kids or small adults and not much between. This one looked like a small kid in his dad's jacket. His hair was a straight brown bowl that looked cut at home. His cheeks were shiny with tears. He had that red, chapped look around his nose like he'd been crying for too long. He wore a faded shirt with a dinosaur on it, the kind of cartoon T-Rex you find on clearance racks, and jeans that bunched at his ankles. His shoes were those cheap skater ones with white rubber toes scuffed down to gray. Hey, buddy, Tyler said. His voice ramped up into the register adults use to sound safe. He didn't lower the camera. He panned slowly like he didn't want to spook a deer. "Where's your mom, man?" The boy didn't look at Tyler, he looked at me. I felt something happen in my chest like a hand closing. The wind moved through the trees hard enough to push the grass in one direction, and then the other. The boy's hair didn't move at all. "What's your name?" I asked, because your mouth goes to autopilot when you forget how to be smart. He sniffed. His shoulders hitched. "Evan," he said. It would be easy to tell you that we both laughed and then got serious, or that we didn't believe him, or that we turned back to the camera and said, "Guys, we are not kidding." But we didn't do any of that. We just stared, Tyler and me, and the camera stayed locked on my face even though it should have been on the boy. Later, when the police returned the camera, I saw why. Tyler's hands weren't steady anymore. The focus kept drifting like the camera didn't want to settle on anything. It slid past the boy's shoulder every time. I said, "No, that's my name," because it felt like a thing you should say to a kid who didn't understand. "I'm Evan. Are your parents here?" The boy's mouth opened and I thought I saw the words form. But what came out was a sound like wind compressed into a pipe. He swallowed and tried again. "He's here," he said, and his eyes went past me like he was looking at someone up the hill. Behind us, in the direction of the church, something thumped like a door easing shut and catching at the end. Tyler glanced back, then at me, then at the boy. "Who's here, man? What's his name?" The boy blinked. More tears welled. He lifted his hand in that hesitant way kids do when they're not sure they're allowed to point. He pointed at the camera. "Him." Tyler laughed once, a dry adult noise he didn't use in videos. "Me?" he said, as if the kid had just accused him of cutting in line. "I'm Tyler, bud." "Tyler," the boy repeated like he was testing the word. He sniffed again. I wanted to kneel down and put the dinosaur shirt in my hands like you do when you're trying to get eye level, but my knees wouldn't bend. "Where do you live?" I asked. "We can call your mom." "I've got bars." I didn't, but I said it anyway. "We can take you home. You shouldn't be out here." "He's not supposed to be here," the boy said. He moved his finger from the camera to me and then stopped. His lip trembled. He stepped back like something brushed the back of his legs. "Don't," he whispered. And for a second I thought he was talking to me because the word came out soft and pleading. Then his eyes jerked to the left. He flinched. "Don't," he said again, louder. I said, "Hey," because it felt wrong to watch a kid be afraid and not fix it. "Hey, it's okay." I took a step toward him. The boy stepped back and, this is the part I hate trying to explain, his movement didn't line up with his body. He moved like a video buffering, sliding short and then catching up like the night itself had a small delay. The camera caught it. "You can see the jump if you go frame by frame." Tyler muttered a word he never used on the channel. I told myself I'd stepped wrong and my eyes had jerked, and that's why the boy seemed to stutter like a skipped heartbeat. "Evan," the boy said, and I answered, "Yeah," because I had to. He pointed again, this time at the nearest oak, a big one whose trunk split into two a few feet off the ground so it looked like a wishbone. "He's calling you," he said. He wiped his face with the heel of his hand. The long sleeve of the jacket he wore fell back. There was dirt on his wrist like he'd been playing in a field. It was such a normal detail it almost calmed me. "Who?" Tyler's voice cracked. The camera dipped and rose. The boy's face screwed up. He was trying so hard to say it. I could see the muscles working at the corners of his jaw. "Evan," he managed, and then he bent over like the word had pushed him. He sobbed once, a cough sob that sounded like it had been stored too long. It dawned on me he might be in actual trouble, like lost or hurt or something worse. I stepped the rest of the way until I was close enough to smell the cold on him. That clean fabric smell kids' clothes have. "Okay," I said softer. "Okay, we're going to help you. Can you tell me your last name?" I held my flashlight so it didn't hit his eyes and I crouched. My knees did bend that time. "It's okay." He lifted his head a little. His eyes were dark brown, the kind that almost look black when there isn't much light. "Evan," he said, and the way he said it made my throat go tight. Not like a question, not like a correction. Like a fact. Like I had asked for his last name and he had given it to me. I opened my mouth to say something and couldn't remember any words that made sense. Tyler's breathing got louder in the camera mic. The light drifted past the boy's shoulder again. In the trees behind him, something shifted. It wasn't the wind. The branches leaned one way, For half a second, the leaves hung the wrong direction and then snapped back like they had never moved at all. The sound the oaks made changed, like they were finding a new rhythm. It isn't a sound you recognize if you've never heard it. Your name tucked into air. Once you hear it, you can't pretend you didn't. Let's call somebody, Tyler said. This is messed up. We need an adult. We are adults, I said automatically, and then almost laughed at how stupid that sounded. I dug my phone out anyway and held it up. No bars. I tried to load anything, even a blank page. Nothing. I put it back in my pocket and felt the weight like a rock. The boy looked up the hill toward the church and then back at me. You have to go, he whispered. Please. He wants you to stay. Who? I started, but the last word broke off. I heard my name again, close right behind my left ear. Evan. Not a kid's voice, my voice. I can't explain it any better. Imagine your own voice leaving your own mouth from a foot behind your head. That's what it was, Tyler swore. The camera lurched. The flashlight beam scrawled light over the ground. I whirled and pointed my light back up the slope. And for a second, the beam caught a person standing between two headstones near the bench, the exact height and everything of a person. But the light hit only the front of my hoodie, the same shade of gray, the same patch where my mom ironed over the zipper 2 winters ago. The beam hit my face. I flinched and stepped aside so I could see around myself. There was nothing there. Okay, Tyler said, breathless now. Okay, we're done. The camera view found me again. My mouth was open. I couldn't get enough air. The cold felt inside me. The boy made a small sound, a moan like he'd scraped his knee, but he didn't move. He looked stuck in place, like something had set him there and given him a script he wasn't allowed to deviate from. Don't, he whispered again, as if whoever he was talking to was rushing and he needed them to slow down. He lifted both hands to his ears and pressed them tight. His mouth stretched into a line. His eyes shone. Evan, the voice said behind me again. My voice. And then somewhere off to the right, it said my name again, but wrong, like someone had heard it and was trying to imitate it. The second voice dragged the V a little too long. Evan! The oaks answered with a hiss that sounded almost happy. Tyler grabbed my sleeve. We're leaving, he said. The camera wobbled. The image went blurry and then sharp again. For once he didn't care if his shot matched what he thought his viewers wanted. Now, man. The boy dropped his hands. He doesn't want you to, he said. It sounded like he was apologizing. It would be easy to lie here and say I was brave and took the boy's hand. I didn't. I reached for him and stopped, inches short. I was afraid that if I touched him, my hand would pass through or it wouldn't, and I didn't know which was worse. The boy flinched like he knew what I was thinking, and he took a step backward with that tiny hitch again. He looked at me like he expected me to be the one who cried. Don't look, he told me. Don't turn around. Buddy, Tyler said, and for the first time since we saw the boy, Tyler sounded like the oldest version of himself, like he'd never be a kid again. Come with us. We'll walk to the road. We'll get somebody. Come on. The boy shook his head so hard his hair moved finally, a rough shake that made the bangs fall into his eyes. He wants you to, he said, and the pronoun felt wrong, like he had switched to a rule book the rest of us couldn't see. Please don't. A low sound came from up the hill. Not a growl. Not a voice. You know how old buildings breathe when the heat kicks on? That long pipe wail? It sounded like that, except it came from open air. Every oak leaned a little toward it. The sound pressed on my ears until I wanted to swallow to pop them. The flashlight beams flicked like the batteries had decided to die at the same time. The camera's little red light pulsed and then held steady. Evan, my voice said again. It sounded closer and tired. Not angry, just tired. I don't know if Tyler dragged me or if I ran. The footage shows the horizon lurching and the ground smearing into speed lines. The boy's face disappears from the frame, and then the frame swings around and you can see him for 1 second at the base of the wishbone oak. He's standing with his hands at his sides, his small shoes almost touching the roots. He's crying without making noise, like the kind of crying you do when you've already used up the sound. And then the camera swings away because Tyler's yelling my name now, and the microphone is full of the wind that shouldn't be there. We reach the gravel. The car waited like it always had. Same cheap keychain, same smell of gym socks and coffee. Tyler fumbled the keys and dropped them and said my name again, and I bent to pick them up, and that's when I looked across the field dight. There are sections of whispering oaks where the graves thin out and the ground is just prairie. The grass around the furthest headstones had been mowed down to stubble, but out past where the mower reaches it goes wild. In the middle of it, standing in nothing, was me. It was me the way a mirror is you, but slightly off when the glass bends. The hoodie hung the same. The hands hung the same. The head tilted at the angle my mom teases me about when I'm confused. It wasn't a trick of shadow. Tyler saw it too because he said my name and then, "What the?" And the camera zoomed without meaning to. A rough push on the toggle that made the image jump. Zoom never helps. It only makes the wrong things bigger. The me in the field didn't blink. The wind made the grass lean, but not my hoodie. The hood string on the left, the one that hangs longer because I tug it when I'm nervous, didn't move. My face in the field looked washed out like I'd left it in a car in summer. The mouth was open. The lips didn't move. But within the camera's microphone range, we both heard it whisper. Not loud, not dramatic, just audible enough that you can turn the volume up and run it back and hear it again. That's not me. The me in the field did not turn its head when we slammed the car doors. It didn't move when the engine coughed and caught. The boy might have said something behind us. I never heard his voice again. But I jolted the car into reverse so hard the gravel spit and the front bumper almost kissed a headstone. We left a wild curve of dust in the horseshoe, and I don't remember getting the wheels back on the road. I only remember the way Tyler kept the camera up, because he'd promised a single continuous shot, because the dare said so, because he couldn't stop recording even with his hands shaking. We drove back toward town with the camera pointed out the rear window. It shows the church shrinking to nothing, and the oaks swallowed by the dark, and then the red dot of the record light reflected in the glass like an eye. It shows my mouth moving in the rear view but doesn't pick up anything I said. I think I prayed. I know I said my own name like if I said it enough I could keep it. Halfway to the main highway the camera battery died. It didn't sputter or warn. The red light went out like someone pinched it. The last frame it stored is the dark road and a sliver of night sky in the corner of Tyler's face. His eyes wide and his mouth set like he was speaking but not to me. Then black. We didn't go to a party. I drove straight to Tyler's house because it was closer, and because his parents were out of town, and because my own house felt too full of people who would ask questions I couldn't answer. I pulled into his driveway and he didn't get out. He just sat there, the dead camera in his lap, and stared out the windshield like it was a screen, and he was waiting for the next scene. I said his name. He turned slowly. He looked at me like he was surprised to see me in the driver's seat. I thought he might throw up. He didn't. He said, "I need to see if it's saved." "What?" I said. "The footage." He held the camera up and pressed the dead button anyway. "If we don't have it, no one will." He didn't finish. He got out finally and went inside. And I sat in his driveway long enough for the cold to bleed through the seats and into my legs. I left when his porch light switched off like someone had decided the night should finish what it started. I got home at 3:15 a.m. I know because my mom texted at 3:18. "You home?" I didn't answer. I went straight to the bathroom and turned on the shower and sat in the tub while the water beat the backs of my hands. I didn't take off my hoodie. I kept my eyes on the tile and said a stupid thing out loud. "That's not me," I whispered, just to hear if it sounded the same in my voice when it was my mouth moving and not the night. It didn't. Mine sounded more scared. I fell asleep around dawn and woke up to police lights throwing blue through the slats of my blinds. 2 officers stood on our porch talking to my mom. One of them had a notebook. He was writing slow like he wanted my mom to fill the silence. When I came into the hall, he straightened, and his face did the thing older adults' faces do when they realize you're younger than your voice made you sound. "Evan?" he asked. I nodded. My mouth was dry. He told me Tyler never came inside. He told me they found his front door unlocked, the lights on, everything undisturbed. He asked if we had been together and I said yes. He asked where. I said Whispering Oaks. My mom made a small sound like a sneeze turned inside out. The second officer wrote that down too. They asked if we had been drinking. I said no. They asked if anyone else had been there. I said yes because I didn't know what else to call the boy. And then I tried to explain the footage and the single take and the dare and the toy car at the base of the stone. I tried to explain how the oaks sounded like words if you stood between them long enough. I tried to explain how my name sounds wrong in other people's mouths. They told me to come with them, that we needed to go back out there. My mom asked if she should come, and they said yes. We drove in a low-speed train down the 2-lane, past fields that would be hay in spring. The officers kept their lights off. The church sat just like it had, as if nobody had ever moved through it. The plastic sign still flapped. The gravel still looked like bones. Tyler's car was where we left it. The bench was where we sat. The tripod stood by itself, the camera gone. I said, "He took it," like it explained everything, and then corrected myself because I knew how that sounded. Tyler took the camera home. We called his phone. Straight to voicemail. The officers fanned out. My mom stood near the sign and kept both hands in the pockets of her coat, like she was waiting to hear if I'd broken a neighbor's window. I walked down to the wishbone oak on my own. The grass was flat where the boy had stood. Don't ask me how I knew that. I knew it. A small plastic rectangle lay near the roots. The camera's battery door snapped clean off like the camera had spit it out. I picked it up, and for a second I held it in my palm like a relic. My name slid into the wind and out again. It didn't sound like anything this time. We didn't find Tyler there. We didn't find him that afternoon or that night. The officers told my mom to keep me close. They said the word prank and then dropped it like it had burned their tongues. People online called his channel. They left comments with shrug emojis and not cool and I hope this is fake. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't sleep. I kept seeing the copy of me in the field, the way the grass moved around it but not against it, the mouth-shaping words that didn't need volume to land. 2 days later, the sheriff's office called. They had the camera. A farmer found it at the edge of a creek that runs past the highway, 7 miles from the church in weeds where floodwater leaves its trash. It looked fine. It had the scuffs we gave it and a new one across the lens cap. The battery door was missing. The card was in it. They wouldn't let me come in until they watched it themselves. When they finally did, they brought me into a room that smelled like dust and old coffee, and they put the camera on the table like a cat they didn't want to wake up. The sheriff, not the deputy who came to my house, asked me to point out the parts that mattered to me. I said the boy. I said the field. I didn't write any of this down when it happened, and I might be getting the hours mixed up. But I remember one thing clearly. He asked me if I wanted to watch it start to finish, and I said yes because I had promised myself I wouldn't look away again, as if looking away had caused any of it. The early shots are boring, like I said. We made stupid jokes. We whispered when we didn't have to. And then the boy steps out from behind the stone and you feel every adult in the room go quiet. You can hear the police breathing. Someone coughs. My name comes out of the boy's mouth and the sheriff's throat clicks like he swallowed it by accident. The camera never catches his face straight on. It tries, the focus slides. You catch the dinosaur shirt and the chapped nose and the cheap skater shoes. You hear him say Evan like a surname. You see my hand reach and stop. You hear my voice behind my head say my own name like a person calling someone in for dinner. And then the climb back up, and the car and the figure in the field. The sheriff paused there. "Is that you?" he asked, and his tone made it something more than a question. I said no. I said it 3 times because once didn't feel like enough. He watched it again. "That's not me," the figure whispers, and the sound is just enough to carry, the way I remembered. The sheriff scratched his jaw with 2 knuckles like he was wiping a word off it. "Who is it?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. "I don't know, but it is not me." They never found Tyler. That's the part I keep trying to write in different ways to make it come out less blunt. But it won't. They found the camera by itself with everything still recording until a battery that should have been fresh died, like it had been drained by something heavier than voltage. They found a piece of the battery door by the wishbone oak where a boy had stood saying my name like it belonged to him. They asked around about missing kids and got nothing local. Not for a boy in a dinosaur shirt and cheap shoes. There are 100 old stories about whispering oaks. I don't know if ours is just another one now, stamped onto whatever that place is, or if it was different because of the way the oak sounded that night, because of the way the wind didn't move the hoodie string on the figure that wore my face. I can tell you what happened after the sheriff stopped the video. He turned off the camera and slid it across the table to me. He said I could have it back because there wasn't evidence of a crime. It felt wrong to touch it. It felt wrong to leave it there. I put it in my backpack. When I left the station, the afternoon sun fell over everything like it was trying too hard. I drove past the church road without meaning to. I didn't turn down it. I kept going until I hit a grocery store parking lot. I sat there with the windows up and the engine off and pulled the camera out and aimed it at my face. I hit record. The little red light came on without a complaint, bright as anything. I looked into the lens and listened. I didn't move. After a full minute, I tried something I had been trying not to think about. I whispered, "That's not me," in the same flat way the figure in the field had done. It did not sound the same. I checked the recording to make sure. It was only me, and the hum of the car next to mine, and a kid crying in the distance because his mom wouldn't buy him something. Regular crying. Regular life. If there's a bad trick in that, I haven't figured it out. I didn't upload any of this to YouTube. People messaged me anyway. They said things like, "Don't let the internet eat your grief," and "Clout chasing on a missing person is low." And my favorite, "Nothing happens in cemeteries. Ghosts like warmth." I didn't answer them either. Some nights I wake up to my phone vibrating with a notification from a number I don't know, and the voice message is nothing but wind, not white noise, the sound of it moving along a field. If I turn it up all the way and put it to my ear, sometimes I think I hear my name somewhere in it, tucked between the leaves like a flat stone in a stream. I tell myself it's the suggestion more than the sound. I tell myself a lot of things. A week after Halloween, somebody pried the plastic sign off the post at Whispering Oaks. Not the sheriff. Not the church. Some kids, I'm guessing, who wanted a souvenir. A new sign went up. The red tape on the corner of that one doesn't flap because they stapled it. I went once in daylight with my mom because she said I needed to look in sun if I ever wanted to look in the dark without thinking the dark had a shape. We stayed by the fence. The oaks breathed like any trees. The wishbone trunk was just wood. A toy car sat at the base of the low marker, but it was green now. Not brown and not the same model. Maybe someone thought the first one needed a friend. There's one more thing I should say before I stop. The sheriff called again yesterday. He said they'd found something in the church register. A book of names from when people still wrote everything down. It wasn't the boy's name. It was mine. Scrawled there like someone had signed me in long before I was born. I told him it was probably a different Evan. He said maybe. He said the handwriting was different. He didn't say wrong because I think he didn't want to give me the word. He said different. He said the date was November 1st, but the year had smeared like water had dragged it. He laughed a little like he was trying to make the world small again. Probably someone playing a trick, he said. You know how kids are, I do. I know how kids are when they're afraid, and when they're brave, and when they're caught in the middle like a needle on a scratched record. I know the shape of a boy crying without noise and how it sticks to the back of your throat. I know what it feels like when the night says your name in your own voice and asks you to step into a place you know you shouldn't. I know that if you stood with me at Whispering Oaks and listened, the oaks would tell you a true thing, that any of us could go to a place, hear something we think is ours and follow it. That's the part people don't like to hear, because the scariest version of this story isn't the boy and it isn't the figure in the field. It's that there are places in the world where the line between you and the idea of you gets thin. Thin enough to see through, thin enough to step across if you're not careful. Tyler hasn't come home. If he does, I don't know which door he'll try. I don't know if I'll open it. I keep the camera under my bed with the battery door snapped back on using tape. Some nights I pull it out and turn it on and stare into the red eye and tell it my name. I don't play the recordings back. I don't need to hear what I already know. Somewhere out there in a field that pretends to be nothing, something is standing very still and it is looking at a dark place, and it is whispering 3 words to make itself feel better. That's not me. I hope it's telling the truth. I don't go back to check. I'm not a writer. I'm a night shift dispatcher in a county where the radios still pop and hiss like frying pans, and the most interesting calls are usually cows on County Road 6 or a bobcat that got into somebody's chicken coop. Dry Creek is small, 400 people if you count the summer folks who come for the trout. We have 2 cruisers that actually run, one that doesn't, and one cemetery that sits out past the old mill where the cottonwoods lean over the fence like they're peeking inside. I'm writing this because I don't know what else to do with what I saw and heard. I need to set it down somewhere that isn't a typed incident report that'll get joked about in briefing, and then disappear into a drawer. I need a place where someone will take it as seriously as it feels. If you're reading this, pretend you're hearing it on a scratchy radio in a plane room, with a single buzzing fluorescent bulb. That's how it sounded to me. Halloween is usually boring for us. We don't do big runs of kids out here. It's too spread out. There's the trunk or treat in the church parking lot from 6 to 7, and the VFW does chili. Teenagers go up into the state land to drink light beer and scare each other with coyotes. The only real trouble is the occasional out-of-towner thinking our cemetery is a good place to sneak in at night. Sheriff Rudd hates that. He's old school. White Stetson, 2 divorces, a handshake that hurts because he forgets his own strength. He says the cemetery is people's final address, and you don't trespass at a person's address. So this year, after a run-in at a traffic stop where Deputy Allen called a lieutenant from state to tell him, colorfully, to stop trying to run our county from his office 2 towns over, the sheriff decided to let Allen cool off with an assignment. Dry Creek Cemetery, Rudd said that afternoon, leaning on my dispatch window, drinking my coffee like it was his. He can sit out there and make sure the kids don't climb the fence and topple stones. Midnight to 4. Punishment? I said, and he gave me a look. Reflection, he said. Besides, he's got the patience for it. He does quiet better than the rest of them. Allen did quiet. He was 10 years younger than the sheriff, 8 older than me. The kind of deputy who could turn a call around by just showing up and standing there. People stopped yelling because he wasn't. He came from somewhere flat and far away. You could hear it in the way he said sorry and soda. He didn't talk about himself. He had a younger sister he sent money to sometimes. He took early shifts so a single dad on the force could get his kids to school. He wasn't perfect. He'd tell you that. But if I ever had to pick someone to be the last voice I heard, I wouldn't have minded it being his. At 23:55 on October 31st, I logged him en route to the cemetery. He keyed up as he rolled past the city limit sign. Dispatch 7 Adam 7 at Dry Creek. Copy 7, I said. Monitor only unless needed. Call out any activity. Copy. I could picture him as he said it. Arm draped over the wheel. Thermos in the cup holder. The curled rip of duct tape on the corner of the dash where the old radio mount had pulled free. His cruiser had a back left brake light that flickered if you hit a bump. He'd been meaning to fix it. The heater would kick like a mule before settling. I mention these things because later, the little pieces mattered more than the big ones. The radio went quiet. I settled into the slow part of the night. I watched a spider rebuild its web in the corner of my computer monitor. I ate a candy bar that someone had left on my desk. I checked Facebook and saw that Pastor Cole had posted a blurry photo from the trunk or treat of a baby dressed like a pumpkin. Someone had commented that the dry ice had set off the smoke detector in the church hall. Small town drama. At 00:17, Allen keyed up. Dispatch, I've got a light down here. What kind of light? I said. Like a lantern, he said after a second. You could hear the way he turned his head, talking while he looked. Moving between the stones. East side. Copy. Any vehicles nearby? Negative. Gates closed. No tracks on the access road, he paused. I can see my headlights bouncing off the gate, but no tracks coming in. I looked at the clock like that would tell me something. It didn't. Do you want backup? I asked. He was quiet for a breath. Negative for now. I'm going to check on foot. If you don't work with radios, you might not know. There's always a tail on someone's voice that tells you how they actually feel. The little exhale after they key off. The way they hit their consonants like they're tapping a table. Allen sounded steady. He also sounded interested, like the night had finally given him something to do that wasn't just staying awake. Copy 7. Advise. 10-4. I could hear it when he opened his cruiser door. The radio picked up the hinge creak because he had it clipped on his shoulder. I heard the clink of his mag light tapping the side of the car as he pulled it free. Gravel under his boots, wind that only blows out there, turning the tall grass in slow, patient waves. When he walked, the radio thumped lightly against his vest in a rhythm I knew by heart. Gates secured, he said, hopping the fence. Be advised, sheriff is in the area if needed, I said, which was true. Rudd lived 5 minutes from the cemetery, and sometimes he liked to do drive-bys when he couldn't sleep. Copy. It took a moment for me to hear what he meant about the light. It had a sound. Not a sound you could hear on its own, but a difference it made to all the other sounds. Even through the radio, there was a thin, high change in the air when it passed, like the tone a TV makes when it's on a blue screen just before the station comes back. I know that sounds ridiculous. I heard it anyway. Who's out here? Allen called, his voice echoing off stone. This is law enforcement. The cemetery is closed after dusk. Make your way to the gate. When he said whose, the radio doubled him for a fraction. 2 Allen voices, one fractionally late, coming back to sink into the first. I reached for the volume knob and then took my hand away like it was hot. You can get dead air. You can get phantom key-ups when a wire is rubbed raw. It doesn't come across like that. It doesn't harmonize. Do you copy, 7? I said, my voice a little too loud in the room. You doubled. Say again? Nothing, I said. I'm on. I've got you. Copy, he said. And the second voice didn't repeat him that time. He moved between rows. He read names out loud to keep himself oriented. That's a thing they do. Names stick you to a place when the place is as big as the country you carry around in your head. Odell Patterson Murtry, he read. Vietnam. Civil War. No recent stones on this side. Light is still moving? I asked. Affirm. What's your signal strength? Good, he said, and then, hold up. He breathed into the mic and I stopped breathing altogether. Dispatch, I've got my headlights on. Say again? It came out sharp, my headlights, he said. I can see them through the trees. High beams pointing right at the gate. You left your vehicle running? Negative. I shut it down. He took a few steps, gravel grinding. I'm on the wrong side for them to be my lights, he added, almost to himself. They're aimed from the east. I came in from the west. I typed a message to the sheriff without looking at the keys. Headlights at gate, Allen out on foot. Rudd responded a second later with a simple, on my way. Be advised, sheriff is inbound, I told Allen. ETA 3 minutes. Copy, I'm going to approach the source. Use caution. He laughed once, not because it was funny, but because caution is a weird thing to say to someone who's already inside the thing you're worried about. Caution, he said, like he was trying the word out. Roger that. Allen didn't believe in most things he couldn't touch. He believed in weather and evidence. He kept a notebook in his pocket with dates and notes from calls in case it took the county 6 months to move on a case, and he had to remember who said what. If you gave him a mystery, he'd parrot until it was simple. I listened to him move forward like a line drawn in pencil. Still moving? I said, because I needed the static of my own voice. Light stopped, he said. It's low to the ground. You know how a lantern throws that oval? It's like that, but smaller, like someone holding a phone, only warmer. He scraped against a stone, breathed a quiet sorry to whoever it belonged to, and kept going. Dispatch. I don't have tire tracks on the east access. The grass is down but not bent. We had that drizzle at dusk. Still wet, so what are we seeing? I asked, and then realized what I'd said and added, I mean, what are you seeing? Headlights pointed at the gate, he said softly. But no car. The back of my neck prickled. I looked at the cameras in the office, even though none of them showed the cemetery. The building hummed. Somewhere behind the drywall, a mouse ran. I could hear my own breath again because I'd been holding it long enough to get lightheaded. Describe, I said, falling into dispatcher training like it could keep me safe if I stayed very technical. 2 beams, he said.
Spread standard for a cruiser.
White, not yellowed. Hitting the chain link square. There's a halo where the dust is in the air. No source. Copy. And, he said, and stopped like he'd bumped into something. What? The beams don't cross, he said. If you shine 2 flashlights and you walk around, eventually they cross on something. Okay. These stay parallel, he said, like they're not coming from the same place. I could hear him walk. I could hear the night step back when the light bled into it. There's a way light changes darkness that makes you feel like you're the one moving even when you're not. You know how you can tell when someone is in a room even if they don't talk? It was like that. Like the cemetery knew. Anyone present near the gate? I asked. Negative, he said. I've got some fog hanging low. He paused. I can see my breath. Is it that cold? I checked the weather widget, even though weather doesn't hop like that from one side of a town to another. 49 and falling. Not breath cold, not fog cold. Negative on breath conditions, I said. Could be microclimate. He grunted. Microclimate, he said, tasting it like he'd tasted caution. Then, very softly, Huh. That's not right. What's not right? The stones, he said. I must have come around the wrong way. I'm on the newer side now, but... He stopped. Marla. He almost never used my name on the radio. He kept it by the book. What are you seeing? I asked, and my hands were cold on the desk like I'd been outside with him. There's a Langley stone, he said. Baby Sophia Langley, 2017. That's correct, I started, because I remembered the wake and the flowers. She was right, he said, cutting me kindly off. And then the stone next to it says David Kincaid. 1943 to, he sucked a breath between his teeth, to 2027. 27? I said, even though I'd heard him. As in 2 years from now, he said. There's a sticker under the date, the funeral home tag. It's real. It's not a prank. Sometimes families order stones before someone passes in long-term illness situations to take stress off the survivors. We've all seen them with the dash empty, waiting. But a date filled in and a tag, that's not done. Name? I asked. I typed before he spoke, the habit of 100 forms. Kincaid, he said. The barber. 3 doors down from my apartment. A bell on the door that doesn't ring anymore because David took the clapper out when a kid hit a frog inside and it gave Mrs. Tomlinson a heart attack. Alive 2 hours ago when he gave buzz cuts to boys in dinosaur costumes. Maybe someone put a sticker down to freak people out, I said, hearing myself try to usher the world back into its lane. Maybe, Alan said, but without investment. And the one next to it is Pastor Cole, 1979 to 2029. He posted a picture an hour ago of his twins dressed as crackers and cheese. He looked fine. My stomach turned. I pulled my phone up like I could check that photo and make the cemetery apologize. It was there. Crackers and cheese, big smiles. Alive. Any other stones? I asked, hating myself. Mine, he said. Silent stretch. If you've ever ridden out a dead zone on a traffic stop, you know how it hurts. The way your chest gets tight like you're being held underwater. Mine, he said again, finally. Alan, Michael, 1986 to... He stopped like the air around him had taken something out of his voice. To tonight. Negative, I said reflexively, uselessly. -7. I didn't think I'd say this, he said, more calmly than I felt. But I'd like backup now. I had already hit the page for the sheriff. He answered with his truck door boots, the rattle of his belt. 2 minutes out, he said. Lights are on. Copy, I told Alan. Sheriff is, hold, Alan said sharply. Movement at the gate. I heard the wind hush like it was waiting. I heard the fence chain rattle once, though the gate is padlocked, rust frozen through. The radio hummed with some frequency I couldn't place, a thin line of sound like a dog hears a whistle. I tucked my chin down like I could get out of the way of it. Describe, I said, because I didn't know what else to say. Fog rolling in across the low ground, he said. It's laying like a sheet. There's someone in it coming out of the tree line. Civilian uniform, he said after a small, careful pause. Looks like a deputy. Hat, coat, flashlight in the offhand. He took a step forward. I could hear how the light from the fake headlights hardened shadows around his legs. Sheriff, I said into the phone, not on the radio. Passing the mill, Rudd said. 30 seconds. 7, I said into the radio. Describe the uniform. The patch is wrong, he said. It's old, same shape, different stitching. Looks like the one in the photos from the 60s. Could be someone in a costume, I said, hearing the thread of hope get laughed out of the room by what we both knew. We don't get high-effort reenactors in Dry Creek. Hat brim is down, he said. Can't see the face. Sheriff is on scene in Marla, he said, and he wasn't on the radio anymore. He was whispering like his mouth was to someone's ear. I'm here, I said, and didn't know who I was saying it for. Even if this is nothing, he said, tell Rudd not to come in through the east side. If the ground looks right, it's still wrong. I typed it to the sheriff. He said, copy, like chewing a nail, and threw his truck into the west entrance. The camera I can see from my desk showed his headlamp sawing down County 14 and then dropping out of frame. 7, I said. Sheriff arriving. Copy, he said, and then, with a gentleness that made my eyes sting, don't come through the fog. His body cam clicked on. He never turned it off, but sometimes the sync lagged. It pinged my screen and I pulled it up out of habit. The angle was low, chest level. It showed the fence, lit like it was noon by nothing. It showed the fog, sitting, and the silhouette of a uniform just beyond the gate not moving as if he'd grown up out of the dirt there. The hat's brim cut the shape of a face without giving you the face. I watched while listening to the radio, two sets of senses that didn't line up with each other. "Identity yourself," Alan called. The uniform beyond the gate did not. He stepped closer. The camera's mic picked up his breathing as it slowed on purpose. He always did that when he needed to ratchet himself down. "I'm Deputy Michael Allen with Dry Creek County. If you need help, say so." The uniform lifted his hand like he was going to wave and then put it back down. It moved like a reflection coming into time with you after a ripple. "Do you copy me?" Alan asked. "Do you need medical?" The uniform turned his head a fraction and the patch flashed again. Our county shape, stitched in thread you couldn't buy anymore. "Sheriff's on scene," I told Alan in his ear. "He's on the west side. He requests you hold position." "Copy," Alan said without looking away. "I see him. Tell him to stay there." On the camera, his hand trembled once and then steadied. He reached down and touched the fence. Nothing shocking happened. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. "Sir," he said, "I need you to step to the gate so I can see your face for identification." The uniform did not step. The fog behind him curled and uncurled like something breathing under a sheet. I heard Sheriff Rudd key up, breathless. 7, I'm at the west. I got your vehicle." "Headlights?" Alan asked without looking. "Negative," the sheriff said. "Dark. If you've never felt everything you know about a place take one step left and then look over at you to see if you noticed. I hope you never do." It was like that. The world allowed both of those things to be true. It held them up like hands losing their grip on a heavy object. The radio cracked and popped like grease. I heard my own voice come back on a half-second delay saying words I hadn't said yet. "Do you copy?" it asked. "Do you need medical?" I took my hands off the desk and put them in my lap because they were shaking. Alan put his boot in the lower chain-link diamond and climbed. He swung his leg over, keeping his hand out and body turned, like his academy pictures, like he'd been taught. He dropped to the inside and stood very still. The fog took his knees and then gave them back. 7, I said. "Sheriff requests you wait." 2 steps, Alan said. Not to me, not to anyone. Just 2. He took 2, and the uniform on the other side took 2 to meet him, at the same speed without moving. The camera didn't catch the movement. It caught the difference the place where the uniform wasn't then was. "Hold," Alan said softly, and the word did something to the air like it had a weight. "Who are you?" he asked again. The uniform lifted his head fractionally. The brim gave up a slice of face, and in that slice there was nothing man-pleasant or monstrous. Just what you'd get if you smudged a face with your thumb in a photo. There might have been eyes. There might have been not. "What do you want?" Alan said, and if you listen to the body cam you can barely hear what I heard live on the radio. Another voice underneath. Same words. Half a beat late, trying to be him and not getting the vowels right. The uniform moved his hand again, and then lowered it like gravity worked different where he was. Then he stepped back into the fog like a man stepping off a porch and was gone. On the body cam you can see Alan turn his head and look back across the cemetery, as if a sound had come from behind him. Later, when we slowed the footage down, we saw that there is another uniform standing where he had been standing at the fence. Another Alan shape. Just an absence in the fog, the same patch, the same shoulder line. In real time, we didn't see it. "Marla," Alan said, calm in a way that wasn't human anymore. "If I stop responding, you tell Rudd." 7, I said, and my voice cracked. "Stay with me." "You tell him to lock the gate," he said. "Even if I'm inside." "Negative," Rudd barked. "Negative on that." The radio whined at a frequency that made my molars ache. The static put its hands in my pockets and rattled the change. The body cam image shivered and then reset like someone had switched inputs and then switched back. Alan stepped forward into the fog. I have watched the footage of that step more than any other moving image I've ever seen. I've watched it enough that it shows up when I close my eyes to try to sleep. He doesn't vanish or disintegrate. The sound doesn't ramp up into a scream. He takes a step and then he's stepping still. and the world like a room with a door in it closes around him. The camera keeps rolling. It shows the fence. It shows the gate. It shows the fog shift like blankets over someone's legs. It shows, and this is the part I can't make my mind hold without feeling like I'm going to throw up. Another uniform standing where he had been moments before, hat brim low, shoulder turned. For a few seconds it looks exactly like a deputy keeping watch. If you didn't know, you'd feel safe. Then the feed freezes on a frame where the brim moves up a hair and there's nothing under it that belongs to a person. I tried every channel. I called him on the radio. I said his unit number the way you say someone's name when you're angry, because the minute you get angry, they'll come back into the room and you can yell at them for making you feel like this. Sheriff Rudd went over the fence where Alan had gone. His body cam shows grass, stones, the fog at his belt, his own breath even though the temp hadn't dropped where he was. He walked to where Alan should have been and found only an impression in the wet grass like someone had knelt. It was the only mark that night left behind. We were still there at dawn. The fog bled away like it had been embarrassed. The light laid down flat. The gates looked like gates again and the fence like fence. No headlights. No parallel beams. The stones had exactly the dates they were supposed to have. Kincaid's was chipped at a corner from a winter freeze 2 years ago. I remembered the church ladies raising money to fix it. Pastor Cole brought coffee and stood with Rudd looking at where the deputy had walked in and not out. "Where's Alan?" He kept asking like he'd missed the first part of the story, and if we told it to him right, it would have an ending that would make sense. "His cruiser's at the west entrance," Rudd said, holding his hat in both hands. "Keys on the seat. You sure he's not pranking us?" Pastor asked, immediately looking ashamed of himself. "He doesn't do bits," I told him. "He does the job." We searched every inch of ground, every shed, every hollow between stones, even the drainage ditch where people drop their empties when the VFW overflows. The sheriff called state back in. When the lieutenant climbed out of his SUV, I stayed inside the office because I didn't trust myself not to say the wrong thing. They brought dogs that didn't want to cross the fence. They brought a drone that didn't want to hold a signal over the east side. They called for track logs and tower pings and heat signatures. The deputy from the next county over patted my shoulder and told me to get some sleep. At noon, my friend from records, Sarah, asked if I'd seen my emails. I opened my inbox and sat there heart pounding because there were 2 messages from myself. The first was the auto upload from Alan's body cam. The second was a system message, recording conflict multiple instances. It had never come up before. When I clicked it, there was nothing in the file. Not blank, not corrupted. Just know they're there. We pulled what we had into a conference room and watched it together. Me, the sheriff, Sarah, 2 troopers, a tech from state who kept rubbing his wedding ring like it was a worry stone. We watched Alan walk toward the fog. We watched the uniform replace him like a shadow switching owners. We watched until I couldn't watch anymore. At 4, we had to put out a statement because that's what you do. It said what we could say. That Deputy Michael Allen had not reported to his shift change. That his last known location was Dry Creek Cemetery, that agencies were assisting. At 6, I went home and lay on my couch and listened to my apartment settle like it was built on water. I put a towel under the front door because sometimes smoke from downstairs creeps up, and I wanted the world outside my walls to stay outside as hard as I could make it. I closed my eyes and saw that frame again, hat brim lifting. Everything that should be a face not. When I went back in that night, the sheriff was in my chair, hat on the desk, eyes like a man who's been digging since noon. He stood and handed me a flash drive like it weighed 100 pounds. "Make a copy," he said quietly. "And don't you put the copy where state can find it." "Sir?" I said. "Call it personal insurance," he said, and I nodded because we speak the same language when it counts. He put his hands on the back of my chair. "You hear anything on the radio last night after I went into the fog?" "Once," I said. Just a click, like somebody keying up and changing their mind. He looked at the window like he could see the cemetery from there. He couldn't. "I heard him," he said finally. Not like a voice, like the shape you get in your chest when someone you know walks behind you. "I heard that. We worked through the night. We logged calls. We answered questions. Is this part of a Halloween thing?" Someone asked 6 different ways. "No," I said 6 times. Around midnight, the radio hissed once like it was remembering a different way to breathe. The tower lights blinked in their steady cadence over the ridge. Nothing happened. At 2:14, the gate camera at the cemetery tripped. The monitor in the corner, the one that always has a bit of static even on clear nights, showed fog building in the low ground by the east entrance and then pulling itself into a shape like it had someplace to be. For a second, and only a second, a uniform stood where the fence meets the post. It looked like a man who had decided to stay. The hat brim was low. "Sheriff," I said, not loud, not quiet. He was already at my shoulder. We watched together. The uniform did not move. The fog took it back like it was part of the debt and it was time to collect. The next morning, when the pastor made his rounds, 2 old ladies from town found me on my way to my car and pressed cookies on me I couldn't eat. "He's a strong boy," one of them said about a man older than me. "He'll come back." I thanked them like politeness was a way to keep him tethered. "You asked for an ending. If you need one, take this. We still can't raise him. The gate stays locked now." We assigned another deputy to the cemetery and he called in sick with a voice like he had a cold, only he didn't. The headstones all say the right things in daylight. The ground on the east side is fine if you don't look at it too long. The sheriff keeps the flash drive with the copy in his pocket like a talisman. I keep one in my glove compartment. Sometimes when I park at the edge of my lot and the light hits my windshield just wrong, I see 2 beams in the glass that refuse to cross no matter how I move. If you want the part that turns my stomach, I can give it to you. Yesterday, a kid came into the office with a flyer for the school food drive. He was wearing a plastic deputy's hat they gave out at the parade last year. He stood on tiptoe to see over the counter and grinned at me with a gap in his teeth and asked if he could have a sticker. I handed him one. He peeled it and pressed it to his shirt, crooked and proud. It was our county patch, cheap and new. The sheriff came out of his office while the kid was there and ruffled his hair. The kid looked up under the brim of his plastic hat, and for 1 second I swore I saw the shadow of a real brim cut the air above his eyes, low, like he was standing somewhere foggy and trying to look further than a man can see. I blinked and it was a boy in a Dollar General costume again, asking if he could ride in the cruiser someday. I said yes because you say yes to the future like it's a friend you want to have. I still have Alan's last transmission saved separately. The one that isn't in the report because it didn't come over the primary channel. It's just breath and 1 word twice, caught by a backup mic that we didn't even know was live until after. It's him and it's not, and I can't tell which version scares me more. "Hold," he says, though he's the one moving. "Hold." The body cam cuts off with him walking into the fog and the other figure in uniform standing where he'd been moments before. That's the frame people keep pausing on, like if they could see more they could undo the knot. Sometimes I hate them for watching. Sometimes I watch it myself and try to tell if the shoulders are his or if the person standing there is a shape that men make when they leave, and leave behind the part of them that knows how to do the job. We checked the cruiser again in daylight. The headlights turn on and off when you tell them to, like nothing strange ever happened. There are, as he said, no tire tracks where there should be tracks. There is a little piece of duct tape curled up on the dash where the old radio mount used to be. His thermos is in the holder, half full of coffee gone cold. If you lean in and put your face where his would have been, you can smell pine from the little air freshener he liked, even though it made the rest of us sneeze. If you drive past the cemetery after midnight and you look toward the east gate, you might see what looks like headlights on the fence. Don't stop. Don't roll your window down. Don't pull over to take a picture and send it to your group chat with a ghost emoji. Do me this one favor. Take the long way around on the west, and if you have to cut close, keep your eyes ahead. Even if you're curious, especially then. And if you hear your name on a radio that isn't turned on, if you hear your own voice coming back to you a half-second late, don't answer. That's what I've been telling myself. I don't know if I'll follow my own advice the next time the set hisses and the room gets cold and the gate camera wakes up, like it's remembering something. I don't know if I'll be able to sit still. What I know is this. Some assignments aren't punishment. They're invitation. They're a place that opens and asks quietly, very politely, if you'd like to trade places. If you answer wrong, the world keeps going. The school still rings its bell. The VFW still does chili. The dispatcher still works her shift and buys gas and goes home and puts a towel under the door to keep the world out. People still get haircuts and say, "See you next week, David." And, sometimes when the wind comes out of the east, the chain on the cemetery gate taps one more time than it should. I count them like prayers. It doesn't help. I still hear hold at 2 a.m., and I still see the brim lift on that knot face, and I still measure the distance to the fence in steps that are the same length as his, because I know them, because I know him. If this feels like a story, I'm glad. Stories have edges you can hold. I'm telling you that the edges on this one are not where you think. If you pass through Dry Creek after dark and you see two beams shining straight as rulers at the chain link, don't look for the place where they cross. They don't. That's the part that keeps me up, the part that doesn't line up with how things are supposed to work. We are small, and we live by rules to pretend we are not. When the rules don't hold, the people who go to check on them are supposed to come back and tell the rest of us it's fine. He hasn't come back yet. The radio is quiet. The gate is locked. The fog is thinking about it. And I'm here, writing this, hoping that putting it in words will make it less likely to happen again, knowing it won't. Knowing that at some point tonight I'll hear the soft clink of a thermos in a cup holder and the clatter of a hinge, and I'll say, 7, do you copy? Into a room where I am the only person breathing. I don't usually write stuff like this. I'm the kind of person who rolls their eyes at true scary stories on YouTube, even though I listen to them to stay awake during the late shifts. But because of what happened 2 Octobers ago, and because it won't leave me alone, I'm putting it down the way it actually happened. If you drive Highway 71 between Austin and Bastrop at night, you've probably passed the place without realizing it. Locals call it Pine Ridge, even though it's not really a ridge, just a low rise of red dirt dotted with pines and a church that looks like it would collapse if you sneezed near it. There's a little cemetery on one side behind a wrought iron fence that leans in like it's tired. Half the stones are so old the names have bled away. At the time, I was working dispatch for a regional carrier out of Austin. We handled a lot of late-night hauls to the plants in Smithville and LaGrange. Nothing glamorous. It was steady. I liked the tiny hum of the radios, the routine, the boredom. You learn drivers' cadences. You can tell when someone's tired, when they're mad. When they're trying to hide, they stopped for a Whataburger. I'd doze in the chair in that way dispatchers do. One ear on the scanners and one eye on the GPS pings crawling across my screen like ants. One of our regulars was a guy named Eddie R., 40s, divorced, the kind of man who got every smoking area cashier to talk to him about their lives without trying. He didn't drink, not anymore, and he always double-checked his tie-downs like he was practicing a ritual. The drivers respected him because he didn't act like a big shot. He'd been out there long enough to be calm about everything. That night, technically morning, it was October 30th rolling into the 31st, Halloween. I remember because I'd made a dumb joke earlier to one of the new guys about watch for witches on 71. Weather was clear, cool after a week of sticky heat. The wind had shifted and brought in that cedar smell Texas gets when it decides it's fall. We had a handful of trucks on the road and my supervisor had gone outside to vape. Eddie checked in at 2:02 a.m., just east of Austin, mile marker 205. He sounded normal. He said he'd stop for fuel at the big station before Bastrop and then cut south. We hang up. I went back to my Sudoku and listened to DPS traffic crackle on the scanner. Deer strikes, a disabled sedan near Del Valle. Nothing we'd need to worry about. A few minutes later, static edged into the line like someone breathing over an old phone. I thought it was one of those weird propagation things. Night makes radio strange. Then Eddie's voice came back, distant, clipped. "Dispatch, you got me?" "Copy, Eddie, what's up?" "I'm at the old church on 71, he said. "Guy's flagging me down at the cemetery gate. Looks like a trooper. He says there's an accident inside the fence." I stared at the clock. 12:17 a.m., the scanner was quiet. When I pictured the stretch between Austin and Bastrop, I knew the place he meant. I'd noticed it in daylight. How the church's windows were boarded except for a round one at the attic like a blind eye. How the sign out front had lost half its letters. There's not much shoulder there. It's more trees than town. "You sure it's a trooper?" I asked. "Looks the part. Hat, uniform, flashlight. He's got a unit pulled just inside the fence facing the headstones. Front end's behind the gate. He says he needs a hand and he's already called it in," Eddie said. His tone was apologetic, like he knew I'd give him grief for stopping in a sketchy spot. I shot a look at the DPS frequencies again. Still quiet. I opened the highway camera feed on the other screen, but the nearest camera was miles back toward Austin. You could see only a smear of headlights, Nothing at Pine Ridge, 10-4. I'll ring Austin Dispatch and check. Don't enter the cemetery, okay? Stay on the shoulder. You're not a medic, he chuckled. I ain't. He says there's a car rolled down by the far pines. Girl inside pinned. He needs my spreader bar and chains to move the stone they hit. Claims his radio's down in the trees. I don't know why that exact detail set something off in my neck, like the tiny hairs were all standing at attention. Maybe because I'd never heard a trooper ask a trucker for tools. Maybe because I pictured that fence, the way the iron curls into points like spears. It felt wrong. Hold, I said. Then I called the number we have for DPS Central Dispatch. It rang. A woman picked up, brisk and awake in the way night people are. I gave her the location. The collapsing church and the little cemetery they call Pine Ridge. Do you have a unit on scene? My driver claims a trooper flagged him down, she typed. I heard faint keys like rain. We don't have anyone assigned there, she said. There's nothing open on 71 near that location. The nearest unit's running radar by Garfield. What about a unit with a dead radio? I said, wincing because I knew how that sounded. Any unit with a dead radio is supposed to check in by phone. That hasn't happened, she said. What's the unit number? I shouted to my supervisor to get his butt back inside and leaned into the mic. Eddie, can you see a unit number? He must have been aiming his phone light because his voice faded as he moved. I heard road noise, the low tidal rush of passing cars. Yep, he said. On the rear quarter. Freight 7. Badge reads MH 3487. He hesitated on the name like he wasn't sure if he should say it. He says, hurry up. I relayed the number to DPS. Silence. Then the woman said, careful. Say that again. I said it again. She said, quieter. Hold, please. More typing. Line clicking. My supervisor slid into the chair next to me, eyebrows up. I mouthed, weird, and put her on speaker. She came back after what felt like a full minute. We had a trooper, Michael H. Badge 3487. He was killed in the line of duty. Halloween night, 1987. The room changed shape. It did that thing where your depth perception shifts like the walls just leaned in. My supervisor shook his head. Nah, under his breath. Can you confirm no unit is staged at that cemetery? I asked. My voice worked, but it took effort. We have no unit there, she said. Don't let your driver approach. I'm calling Bastrop County Sheriff now. They're closer. Keep your driver on the line. What's your callback? And get a location ping if you can. I nodded like she could see me and shot a text to our fleet app to force Eddie's GPS update. The map blinked. He was right where he said, pulled slightly crooked on the shoulder just west of the church. The cemetery gate was 20 yards off his passenger door, a rectangle cut into the fence, the kind that you had to mind your jacket around or the spear points would snag your sleeve. Eddie? Listen, I said, trying to sound calm like this was a routine hazard. Like a cow in the road, DPS does not have a unit there. The badge number you read belongs to someone who died in 1987. Do not go through the gate. Lock your doors. We've called the county. They're on the way. Silence for 2 heartbeats. Then he laughed, small, embarrassed. Okay, that's a good one, he said. You got me. I'm not messing with you, I said. Do not, he cut in, voice a notch tighter. I hear you. But he's right here. He's talking to me through the passenger window. He says his radio is out and the girl's pinned under one of the stone markers and I can't just sit here. My supervisor leaned in. Ask for his name again. Ask something only a current trooper would know. Eddie, can you ask him which office he's out of? Ask for his badge again, I said. I heard Eddie roll down his window a notch with that clattering whine old trucks have. A colder sound came through the line, like wind passing through pine needles. It didn't match the left speaker's ambience. It sounded like it was in the room with me, right behind my chair. Sir, Eddie said politely, what office you with? And can I see that badge again? A pause, then he says Austin. He's got the badge. Looks old, real old, the metal's dull. His hat's like the ones from those 80s pictures, you know? And he keeps calling me son even though I got 10 years on him. Eddie laughed again, but it was wrong this time, thin and high in his throat. He's asking me to hurry. I told him to keep the window up. He didn't answer that last part, just said more to himself. That's a problem. He raised his voice to the person outside the window. You said she's breathing? Okay, I got a small kit. I said his name again, hard. Eddie, do not go in, he said, almost annoyed. Just gonna shine a light through the gate. I won't step through. I'll keep it on the hinge side. That's when the scanner crackled and, like a delayed echo, Bastrop County Dispatch called out, Unit 12, possible accident near Pine Ridge Church, report of a disabled vehicle in the cemetery, unknown. Caller says a trooper requested assistance. Voices overlapped. They sent a patrol traffic hissed by on Eddie's line. He hadn't put me on hold, but he also wasn't talking. I pictured him with the phone on the dash and the window cracked and his flashlight in his hand. I heard a metallic scrape. The image I got. His fingers on the gate, testing the play in the hinge. I said his name again. No answer. My supervisor pinged his phone. No reply. On the GPS map, Eddie's little dot didn't move. It sat on the shoulder like a bug stuck in amber. We waited. I thought about the uniform outside Eddie's truck, if it was a uniform. I thought about a hand at the glass tapping. I thought about that sir, yes sir tone Eddie used sometimes when cops were around, and how easy it would be to follow them through a gate when they told you there was a girl inside, pinned, breathing, needing help. After maybe 2 minutes of dead air, the mic woke with a ragged inhale like someone had remembered to breathe. I'm back, Eddie said. His voice was steady, but he sounded like he'd run 100 yards. I didn't go in. I put the flashlight through and looked along the path. There's no accident in there. It's stones and dead grass and those ugly fake flowers folks leave. He kept saying inside, but when I told him I'd wait with him for backup, he got different. How? I said. He dropped the sir. He got kind of disappointed, or mad, but with a smile still on like a dad who thinks you should know better. Eddie said. He cleared his throat. He told me my father would be ashamed to see me leave a girl dying, that I should think about what kind of man I want to be. The hairs on my arms went up again. Eddie didn't talk about his dad much, but I knew he'd passed when Eddie was a teenager, gone before he saw Eddie get clean. He'd told me once that if his old man had been around, the divorce might not have hit so hard. What did you say? I asked. I said my father taught me to keep my head and follow the rules so I could be useful to folks who needed me. He said, and that's what I'm doing, waiting for the right people. Good, I said. Stay inside. Windows up. Doors locked. Do not look at him. Don't engage, Eddie laughed lightly. I ain't in a horror movie, dispatch. Tonight you are, my supervisor muttered. Eddie kept his tone sunny, like he was trying to convince himself. He's backing up now, he said. He's walking to his unit inside the gate. I can see the nose of it between the stones. Headlights are off. It looks like an old Crown Vic, the kind from Oh Man. What? I just realized there's no engine sound, he said. And the glass. It's dusty. And there's pine needles all over the hood like it's been parked there for a year. Okay, I said. Okay, just stay put. And we might have made it through without anything else. But fate, or whatever the right word is, has a way of finding the angle you didn't cover. It came as a tap. That simple. A clean, polite tap on glass. Not the passenger side where he'd been talking to the uniform. The driver's side on the door by Eddie's elbow. There was a beat of silence from him that stretched so thin I thought it would snap. I'm not looking, he said finally, almost in a whisper. I'm keeping my eyes on the windshield. Somebody is right at my door. How did he get across without me seeing? He smells like cold dirt. My supervisor made a slicing motion across his throat. Don't talk, don't respond. I swallowed, the tapping stopped. Then I heard a scrape like someone's nails along paint, very soft. It made a little stuttering sound across the door like when you drag your fingers over a washboard. Unit 12 en route, the scanner said. ETA 4 minutes, Eddie whispered. I can see him in the mirror. He's too close to be there. The mirror shows him too far back. That doesn't make sense. Windows up? I asked because sometimes your brain looks for the smallest, dumbest thing it can control. Up, he said. He blew a breath out through his nose like he was trying to fog the glass. He's saying something I can't hear. He has this look, like he's sorry for me. What's he saying? I asked. Can't hear, he said. But it's like he's mouthing, inside, or I tried, or it's time. The tapping switched sides again like a magician's trick. Now it came from the passenger side near the gate. I pictured the uniform at Eddie's elbow again, a hat brim angled down to hide his eyes. There was a muffled thump. Eddie flinched audibly. What? I snapped. He put his hand on the door handle, Eddie said. It didn't open, but he's pulling like it should. Locks, I said. Engaged, he said. Crisp. because action helped. Parking brake set. Keep it that way, I said. How far out is county? 2, my supervisor mouthed, eyes on the scanner. For a second, everything calmed. I could hear Eddie's breathing settle. The tapping stopped. The wind softened back into just being wind. Cars passed. A truck went by with that long Doppler of a heavy load. Then whoever was outside did something that I will never forget, because it felt mean in a human way, not whatever else. He knocked on the glass in a quick rhythm, shave and a haircut. You know it even if you don't think you do. 2 bits? Eddie choked out a laugh that almost turned into a sob. Oh, come on, he said, and it wasn't to me. It was to the world, to the night. Come on. Blue strobe smeared up the trees then, brightening the pines into sickly color. Unit 12 on scene, the scanner said. I'm at the church. I don't see a vehicle in the cemetery. I have an 18-wheeler on the shoulder. Sirens, Eddie said, relief flooding in. I see them. Thank God, okay, dispatch, thank you. They're here. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. My supervisor leaned back. We listened. You can hear the shape of a scene even without seeing it. The way voices carry, the way car doors make different clunks. I heard footsteps on gravel. I heard someone say evenin', with that forced casual cops use when everyone's actually tense. I heard Eddie roll his window down a little. You the one who called? A new voice asked thin through the phone, and I realized I was hearing Eddie's handset pick up echoes from his open window. Yes, sir, Eddie said, his voice a touch shaky. A trooper flagged me down, said there's an accident in the cemetery. He asked me to go inside, but dispatch said no. A trooper? The deputy said. Where'd he go? He was just, Eddie started. Then silence. The kind of silence you get when the thing you're looking at doesn't match the thing you thought you were about to describe. The deputy's shoes crunched on gravel. You see the gates padlocked? He said. Looks like it hasn't been opened in a long time. Eddie didn't answer. I could hear his breath. It sounded like he was breathing with his mouth open, quiet, careful, like if he moved wrong the world might tip. Let's take a look, the deputy said. His voice moved away. More radios crackled. Another unit rolled up and idled, ticking like a hot skillet. They walked the fence. They shone lights over the stones. They cursed about nothing the way men do when they're pretending to be annoyed instead of spooked. Nothing in there, one of them said, just graves and brush. Come on back on the shoulder, sir. We'll get you on your way. He isn't there? Eddie said. You don't see anyone by my truck? No, sir, the deputy said. Door's scuffed up, though. My supervisor looked at me. He mouthed, scuffed, and we both wrote down the time without thinking. 2:31 a.m. Do you want to file a report? The deputy asked. The way they do when they don't want to write one and they hope you'll say no. Eddie, who normally would have said, nah, I'm fine, said, yeah, I do. They moved to the hood of his truck to take his statement. The audio got worse. It was mostly murmurs and the occasional word. Uniform, badge, inside. They were there 20 minutes maybe. They did one slow drive past the cemetery gate with the lights raking over the stones. Then they told him to be careful and left. Here's the part I wish I could end on. If I were telling this like a YouTube story, this is where I'd say he drove away shaken. And that was that. But that's not how it went. 20 minutes later, I was watching his GPS cursor glide east again, slow at first, then steady. His voice had settled back into normal. He joked about how the county guys looked like they'd drawn the short straw. He said he'd still stop for fuel before Bastrop and maybe a coffee if the machine didn't taste like pennies. He sounded tired, but the kind of tired that comes after a scare. Relief-soaked. Thanks for keeping me on the line, he said. I owe you a Whataburger. I told him I wanted a patty melt. He said that was a cop-out order. We laughed. I let myself relax. The map was just a map again. The night was just the night. He pulled into the station near the river just before Bastrop at 2:58 a.m. The clerk there is a kid with tunnel earrings and a permanent expression like he's just smelled something bad. Eddie said he looked half asleep but perked up when Eddie told him the cops had been out. Happy Halloween, the kid said, not joking. While Eddie fueled, he sent a dash cam clip to the cloud. The system does that automatically when you hit certain buttons. It was a clip of the roadside at the church from 10 minutes earlier. It didn't show anything you could write a report on, just his truck idling. The fence, the gate, the dark mouth between the pines. If you freeze frame, you can convince yourself there's a vertical streak near the passenger door, like a shape reflected in glass. We both agreed it was probably nothing. He topped off, paid, got back on 71. It was 3:11 a.m. when he called again. His voice was quiet, almost like he didn't want to wake me. Dispatch? He's back. I sat up so fast my headset yanked. Where? Same stretch, he said. Right where the church disappears behind that billboard that says Jesus saves in letters someone spray-painted, devil horns on. He blew out a breath, through his nose, a habit when he was irritated, with himself for being scared. He's in the lane this time, in uniform, hat tilted down. He waved me over like he's doing traffic control. Keep going, I said. I'm slowing, he said. I know. I'm slowing because I don't want to plow him. He's standing right in the lane. He's not moving. He's smiling. Go around, I said. I don't care if you hit the wake-ups. Go around, he didn't answer. Somewhere in the background, a song came on the radio. One of those old country ones from the 80s, thin fiddle, steel guitar. It sounded dampened, like it was coming from inside a closet. I realized it wasn't his stereo. It was something else bleeding in. Okay, he said finally. I'm going to pick him up. No, I said. Absolutely not. Just to get him off the road, he said, apologetic as always. Just to the next lit pull-off. It's dangerous to leave him standing there and He cut off. There was a knock on glass again, this time right next to the mic. It made me jump in my chair. Then his door chime dinged, 2 bright little notes. Eddie, I said, even though I could hear what he'd done. Got him, he said, and his voice changed. It went hollow for a second, like he'd turned his head. He spoke to someone in the cab. Evening, officer. A man's voice, low and old radio clear, came through like he was talking from the bottom of a well. Thank you kindly, son. Just down the road, and that's it. That was the last I heard live. His cell dropped the call like somebody cut a wire. The GPS dot continued east at 45, then 50, then 56. It didn't drift. It didn't swerve. It followed the line like a stylus in a groove. I kept calling. No answer. I pinged. No update. At 3:18 a.m., his truck disappeared from the map. Vanished, gone. Like the system forgot he existed between one heartbeat and the next. We found out later they had one of those county-owned drones up that night. It was testing thermal imaging over the river. The operator happened to swing it toward 71 because he'd heard the call earlier. The drone caught a bit of footage. A big rig moving east with a small figure in the passenger seat that looked like a man in a hat. Just a heat shape. Nothing to prove. But then midway between the church and Bastrop, the truck's thermal signature flickers like a candle in a draft and winks out. No crash report. No skid marks. No gouge in the dirt. No overturned rig in a ditch. Nothing. They searched for days. Helicopters. Dogs. They checked every culvert and cow pond within 10 miles. It was like the road swallowed the whole truck. 2 days later, DPS called me back. Not the woman from the night, someone else. He asked about the badge number again. I told him. He told me he'd looked up the 1987 incident out of morbid curiosity. Trooper Michael H. died responding to a car that spun into the Pine Ridge Cemetery ditch during a Halloween storm. He went through the gate to help a driver stuck under a toppled headstone. The ground gave under him. He fell into an old grave that had been hollowed by water and roots and broke his neck. He was 27. It took hours for anyone to realize where he'd gone. The rain filled the hole silently. I don't know if that's true. It sounds like something you tell to make a pattern where there isn't one, but the date lined up. The badge number was right. The church and cemetery were already old then. Things do happen the same way over and over. Weeks later, Bastrop County released the dashcam footage we'd auto-uploaded that night under a public records request. They blurred anything identifying. It went small viral in the local scene and then got buried under football scores and elections. In the clip from 3:11 a.m., you can see Eddie's headlights swing across the pines. There's a shape in the lane, and I'll be honest, it could be anything. I've stared at it until it hurts. A hat, a trick of light, fog. He slows. The passenger door opens. Somebody small and precise climbs in, the way old men do. Careful, as if their joints don't trust them. The dash cam mics pick up that tinny old country song, even though Eddie never listened to that station. Then they drive. For 2 miles, everything is almost boring. The CB chatters. The mile markers tick. The passenger turns his face, and if you freeze on the right frame, The empty places where the eyes should be look too dark. And then, before the road curves toward the river, they're just not there. The seat goes from occupied to empty in a blink like a skipped frame. The headlights keep carving the dark for half a second. Then the video cuts to black as if someone palmed the lens. People said it was edited. They said Eddie ran off for debts or to start fresh in Mexico or to leave behind a tragedy I didn't know about. The company lost money on the truck and the load. Insurance wanted to talk to me twice. Bastrop deputies started avoiding my calls and then stopping in at our office to make awkward talk. Men who'd been on scene that night. Men whose shoes had crunched on Pine Ridge gravel. One of them left his card on my desk with a scuffed corner, and I swear it had a little smear of red dirt like you get if you lean your hand on certain kinds of Texas clay. I threw the card away and then dug it out of the trash and taped it inside my notebook because I didn't want to be the kind of person who throws the only proof away. I still work nights. I still dispatch. I still drive 71 sometimes to clear my head. I've passed the church in daylight a dozen times since. If you go slow and look, you can see where they patched the fence after the 80s. You can see the gate is chained and padlocked. You can see the church's round window like an empty socket. If you stop, you'll notice the pines hiss even when the wind is nothing. You'll think you see something move in the glass of your own truck over your shoulder, a shape you won't turn to face because you'll be mad at yourself for being stupid. I don't know what happened to Eddie. I don't know what climbed into his cab. I've heard the stories, that cemeteries keep things in and not the other way around, that certain calls echo forever if no one answered them right the first time. I heard a tow guy swear that sometimes late in October, on an empty stretch near Pine Ridge, he has to move his cones because they keep walking toward the gate like some kid is nudging them. He told me that and then laughed like he wished he hadn't. Here's the last thing. It's small and it doesn't prove anything, but it hooks under my ribs at night. 2 weeks after I cleaned out Eddie's locker with his kid picked up an old family photo. Just a 4x6 of Eddie and his ex and their boy at a rodeo back when the boy was a toddler. The son turned it in his hands and frowned. He pointed to the background. There was a cluster of men behind the fence line way in back. Most were blurry because the focus was on the family. One of them was just a hat brim and a smile. You couldn't see his eyes because the shadow ate them. You couldn't see his badge, but if you let your mind soften, you could almost make out the number on the shoulder brass. You could almost hear a friendly voice saying, "Just down the road." Maybe your brain makes faces because it wants to. Maybe mine does. I'm okay with that. It's better than the alternative. If you find yourself out there past midnight and you see a man in uniform waving near the cemetery gate, do what Eddie tried to. Be a good person, keep your head, wait for help. And if you're the kind of person who can't stand to pass someone in need, who would open your door because you were raised that way, then I hope you don't drive a rig. And I hope your dash cam keeps recording, and I hope, if something asks you to go inside, you remember how long some nights are. Because every year since, on the last week of October, my office phone rings at 3:11 a.m., a blocked number. If I answer, there's breath like wind in pines. If I don't, it leaves a message that's always the same length, 27 seconds. Long enough for an introduction, a request, a knock on glass. Long enough to think about a boy's father and the word son. Long enough for someone to say in a voice with 1987 baked into it, "Just down the road." I don't return those calls. I keep the padlock photo in my desk. I leave the radio on the old country station sometimes, just in case. And when a driver checks in around there, any driver, I tell them the same thing. Windows up, doors locked, eyes ahead. You can still smell the red dirt in the morning, even in Austin. It sticks to everything, and if I fall asleep in my chair just before dawn, sometimes I dream I'm watching that patch of highway and the truck goes by like it always did and doesn't vanish. It just keeps going. There's no tap on the glass, no careful foot on the step, no old song fading in from nowhere. Just a driver doing a job and a dispatcher who didn't have to count the seconds between breaths. Those are good dreams, they don't last long. I don't know how to start this without sounding like I'm trying to sell you something. I'm not. I'm not linking my channel. I'm not asking you to like or subscribe or whatever. I haven't uploaded in months and probably won't again. I'm writing this because I wake up some nights convinced I can still hear the boots, and because I need someone else to tell me it sounds crazy. If you've lived around Lubbock long enough, you've heard of Hollow Bend. If you haven't, Picture a place that used to be a town until the highway bent around it, and people decided it was easier to move than to pray the wind would change. By the 1950s, it was a map smudge, church, post office, a handful of clapboard houses yawning into the dirt, and a cemetery on a rise with a view of nothing. Halloween is a bad night for good decisions. Mine was deciding to do EVPs there. EVPs is a fancy way to say sit very still and record silence until you think the silence says your name. I'm not a true believer, or wasn't. I made videos where I took basic audio gear, went to supposedly haunted places, and tried to get something verifiable. Most of the time it's pipes, raccoons, or you psyching yourself out. But people like the format. I'm decent on camera. I do a lot of, okay guys, listen close, and then cut to me debunking a whisper by matching its frequency to wind through a broken window. The fun part is when something lines up with the story. That's rare. That's the hook. My friend Maya was my camera op half the time. She doesn't scare easy, which is why I asked her to come. She said she had a shift at the coffee shop until 9, but could meet me after. Don't go in alone, she told me. I'm serious, Tyler. I'll scout it, I said. You bring the balanced mind. I left Lubbock around sunset. The drive south isn't scenic. The sky eats everything. I had a Zoom recorder in a padded case, 2 shotgun mics, a lav, a compact camera, a cheap thermal thing I never trust, extra batteries, and those clip-on lights influencers love. I also had a printed map with a red X from a Reddit DM, Hollow Bend Cemetery. Northgate busted, follow the fence line. It looked like a dare. On the way, I stopped at a gas station with a hand-lettered sign that said cash price different. The woman behind the counter had her hair up in a pencil and a tattoo of a hummingbird near her collarbone. She looked at my gear bag and said, "You going to the Bend?" I tried to be cool about it. "Just filming some Halloween content." She made a mouth like a paper cut. "Sheriff says not to." "Sheriff would say that about a lot of things," I said, trying to keep it light. She slid me my change and stood there for a second like she was deciding whether to add something. "The ground out there's weird," she said finally. "Don't step on names. My grandma would say that." "I'll respect the names," I said. "Don't go through the gate," she added quieter. "Even if it looks open." When I left, an older guy in a cap with some kind of cattle brand stitched on it was by the coffee pots. He watched me go like I was a walking headline. The last stretch is dirt. The road widens and narrows for no reason. The dust hugs the car until your taillights look like a fire. There's a dead cotton gin with all the windows busted out, and a church that might be a church or a barn depending how you squint. The cemetery sits on a knoll, fenced with bent posts and a web of rusty wire. Someone painted its name on a plank. Hollow Bend. The letters are a little too neat and weirdly fresh, like someone retraced them in the last week or two. I parked with the nose of the car facing the road like I'd need to leave fast. It was just past 8. Maya texted that she was cashing out and would be on the way around 9:15. "Don't be dumb," she wrote, and then a skull emoji. I filmed my intro while there was still a wash of gold in the sky. "What's up, guys? Happy Halloween." I'm at Hollow Bend Cemetery about 40 minutes south of Lubbock. Locals say it's been empty since the 50s and that you can hear. You know how this goes. I kept it light, conversational, like I was telling a story at a kitchen table. I did a couple takes and then did a slow pan of the fence and the hill. The north gate really was busted, one hinge still on the post and the other side drooping like a broken arm. Between the slats, the stones lifted up like teeth. I could see a big live oak in the middle, roots pushing up the ground around it in heaves. I clipped a light to my collar, set the camera on a mini tripod, and started a wide static shot looking through the slats. I figured I'd do my usual bit. Leave the camera rolling on a safe wide while I walked the perimeter with the audio recorder, so if anything popped on the sound I could cut to where I was. I don't know how to explain the feeling when you first cross a boundary you shouldn't. It's not a curse or a bad vibe. It's more like being 12 again and stepping on the thin ice at the edge of a pond. There's a pop under your boot you can't hear, but you feel it in your teeth. I didn't go through the gate. I'm not saying that to be cute about the woman's warning. It looked like a trap on its own. The wire was stretched in a way that said it would bite. Instead, I followed the fence line to the left where it bowed out. There was a spot where deer or teenagers had been going under. The wire was shiny there, the ground smoothed. I slid the recorder out of its case, clipped the windscreen on, and hit record. The little red LED looked almost medical in the dark. "Audio rolling, test 1, I said. "Hollow Bend, North Perimeter, 8:15. I clicked the Slate app on my phone just to sync a marker later. The sky went from washed-out blue to all at once black. West Texas doesn't do gradients. The stars felt low. The wind picked up and dropped like a kid playing with a dimmer. I skirted under the wire and pulled myself up, careful where I put my hands. The ground had that crunchy, soft feel of old leaves and topsoil. I thought about what the gas station woman said, don't step on names, and looked down. There were little rocks everywhere, broken pieces of headstone, some set at angles like someone had tried to fix them and gave up. I watched my feet. If you've never done EVP work, here's the usual routine. You find a spot where the story says something happened. You stand or sit. You say your name into the recorder because supposedly that helps. And you ask questions. You leave space between questions for answers. 2 or 3 seconds feels like forever in the dark. Is anyone here with me? I said, I mean no disrespect. I just want to listen. Silence. Wind in the oak. Some kind of insect that clicks like 2 coins. What happened to Hollow Bend? I asked. Why did people leave? Silence again, except it wasn't empty. It was like something in the air was holding its breath while I talked. That sounds dramatic. I know how it sounds. I'm trying to be honest about what it felt like. If you've ever watched someone stop talking right before they say what they don't want to say, their whole expression tightens. The cemetery felt like that. I walked toward the oak. There were 3 larger headstones near it. A family, maybe. The names were soft-edged from weather. Aldridge, something like that. Dates hopped around the 1930s. One of the smaller stones was sunk so deep the name had dipped below the dirt. I brushed it gently with my fingers. It's not like me to do that. I was thinking about the camera back at the gate, that it was probably catching a nice moody shot of me in the distance with the light on my collar. A lonely little comet in the dark. The idea made me feel less alone and more weirdly watched at the same time. Are you okay with me recording audio? I asked. If you'd like me to stop, say stop. That's my consent line. I picked it up from an old investigator in New Orleans. I've said it in 100 empty rooms. No one's ever answered. I stood there and counted Mississippi in my head. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 bootsteps behind me, just 1 set. Steady, heavy. Not a shuffle or a scrap. Not animal. The sound of someone walking up casual like they knew where everything was in the dark. The stone in my throat lodged itself permanent. I did what people do when they're afraid and trying not to act afraid. I turned halfway, slow, like I hadn't heard anything. There was nothing behind me but my own little circle of collar light, and beyond that, the black. The steps stopped when I moved. I waited. Nothing. My ears did that ached-out stretch when they're leaning for a sound. Hello? I said, and I wish I could print out for you how normal I made it sound. I'm recording. I don't mean any harm. Silence. The wind came down the hill and brought the smell of dirt and cedar. I looked at the recorder on its little strap in my hand. The red LED, a dot you could push through paper. I'm going to play this back, I said. Sometimes I can hear better when I listen back. I cupped my other hand around the recorder and hit stop, then play. The headphones were around my neck. I brought them up to my ears like you'd lift a child. The first thing I heard was my own dumb voice. Audio rolling, test 1, and then the wind thinned out behind my questions. You can tell a lot about a place by how wind prints on a mic. This came through like water under a door. When the part came where I asked, "Are you okay with me recording audio?" I stopped breathing again, listening for a whisper or a crackle. In the space where I left room, I heard a voice. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't that rustle you can talk yourself into. It was the clean, unhurried voice of a man who's sure you'll do what he says. "Stop recording," he said. I yanked the headphones off. For a second, all I could hear was blood sound and wind. Then, bootsteps, 2 of them just behind me. I turned fast and my light swung around and caught nothing but oak trunk and the gleams of the carved letters. I tried to convince myself I had just heard something from town carried up the hill, or a coyote, or the thermal camera in the bag knocking. I did what I always tell people not to do. I argued with the situation out loud. "I'm here out of respect," I said, making my voice even. "I'm just going to ask a couple questions. If you don't want me to record, I'll leave." Bootsteps closer, 1, 2, and then a pause. Like whoever was making them didn't mind me knowing how far they'd come. The weirdest part, looking back, is that nothing in me made the connection to run. Not right away. I felt like I had a job. Document, keep your head, don't be the guy who sprints into a fence and impales himself on rusty wire. and then the internet does you in 2 sentences. My brain did this very calm thing where it decided to get more evidence. I hit record again. The LED bit into the night. "Okay," I said, and I could hear the tremor now. "What is your name?" On the recorder from somewhere behind me, a second version of my voice said, "What is your name?" I froze, mouth open, no air. The echo was a perfect imitation. The exact same phrasing, same little swallow on the word what, but different. The tone was wrong. It sounded patient in a way I don't talk when I'm nervous. Patient and a little amused. Like I'd already failed something and the other me was waiting me out. I swallowed. "Why do you want me to stop?" On the recorder, "Why do you want me to stop?" Footsteps again. 2, then 3. They seemed to go in a circle around me, but never fast enough to catch on my light. The dirt felt unsteady, not because it was moving, but because I wasn't sure which way was down. You get that sometimes when you stand in the open at night, your inner ear goes, "Nope." "I'm going to stop," I said. "Out of respect." "I'm stopping." On the recorder. "Out of respect," said the other me, not stopping. I hit stop anyway. I shoved the recorder in my jacket and took a step toward where I thought the fence was. My foot hit something hard under the leaves and made a hollow clack that sounded like tapping a skull. I flinched and told myself it was a branch. I told myself a lot of things very fast. My plan got simpler. Get back to the camera at the gate, get back to the car, sit in the light and the ridiculous safety of upholstery, text Maya, say we'll come back with more people. It felt like an apology and a retreat, and I was fine with that. I started toward the fence. The live oak looked off to my right. I told myself that meant I was angled okay. Then the question came from just over my left shoulder. "What happened to Hollow Bend?" asked my voice, calm, curious, polite, not me. I felt hot from the scalp down. "No," I said out loud for no one. Footsteps now moving slowly exactly with me as I moved, staying just out of my light. The kind of tailing you do when you walk someone home without wanting to spook them. I hate that I know that feeling. "Please," I said, and I didn't know who I was talking to. "I'm leaving. Is anyone here with me?" asked my voice, not from the recorder now, but from the air. I broke then, not into a sprint, but into that half run you do when you're afraid of tripping. The fence had to be ahead. I held the light high, trying to throw it further. The knoll dipped and my foot slid, and I had the idiotic instinct to protect the recorder, which I'll never forgive myself for. The boots sped up to keep pace. Not running, not threatening. Just there, a part of my brain decided the dirt under my feet was mounded in places, like little swells, and I was stepping on them. And if those were the names the woman meant, I was stomping on them clumsy and loud. I whispered, sorry, I didn't mean to, and then felt stupid for apologizing to the ground, and then more stupid for finding that stupid. The fence appeared as a darker dark. I lifted the wire where the deer had gone and scraped my jacket and snagged my bag and then my shirt, and something in me went very small and very old and said, out, out, out. As I wriggled under, the boots stopped on the other side and didn't cross. I lay on the dirt on my back, looking up at the stars that were bright as nailheads, and felt the kind of relief that embarrasses you later. The camera at the gate still blinked its little blue light. I grabbed it and folded the tripod and didn't even do a "we're leaving" sign-off. Maya's headlights showed up on the road as I got in the car. She pulled in next to me, saw my face, and didn't smile. "What happened?" she asked, already out of the car. "Footsteps," I said. It sounded dumb. Voices. My voice. She put a hand on my arm and started to say something that was either, "It's okay" or "Don't mess with me." But then a man's voice came from the darkness at the fence with a steadiness so practiced it felt like a script. "Stop recording," he said. We both looked toward the sound. No one stood there. The oak shifted like a person took a breath. Maya's hand tightened. "That's enough," she said, and something in her tone told me this wasn't up for debate. "We're done. Let's go." We left. We didn't discuss whether we should tell someone. Who would we tell? We heard a voice at a famous urban legend site. Great. The drive back felt 3 hours longer. Every reflector on the posts flashed like eyes. I tried to make a joke to unclench both of us, and it came out like a cough. At my place, we did what I always do. We pulled the footage and audio to the laptop. I had this dumb protective impulse to keep the raw files raw, like they were eggs I needed to hold whole. We watched the gate shot, the wide frame through the slats. You can see me as a tiny figure moving near the oak. At one point, the light on my collar bobs and stops. Maya scrubbed through. Then she scrubbed back. "Listen," she said. "On the camera audio, way before anything should have been in range, you can hear the faint, steady click of boots. Not in the direction I'd been. From behind the camera, from the roadside of the fence. They walk up to the gate, pass so close the camera mic distorts a little, and then continue into the cemetery like the fence doesn't matter." "Could that be?" she started. "Someone messing with us," I said too fast. "Then where are they?" she asked. We scrubbed through again. No figure crosses frame. No shadow that isn't wind. No car other than Maya's later. You can watch dust in front of the lens sparkle like 1,000 dumb orbs people argue about online. None of them look like boots. We played the Zoom recorder files next. My questions sound bored and brave. The silence between them is thick enough to trip on. When I ask, "Are you okay with me recording?" the answer comes so clean it's like a studio patch. "Stop recording." It's a voice you'd trust to show you where the exits are. "Play it again," Maya said, and then again. She put her head in her hands and didn't move and said, "That's not you," like she was trying it out loud. We went to bed with the lights on. I live in a one-bedroom, so I took the couch. Around 3 a.m., I woke hard like someone pulled a string on my chest. I thought I heard boots in the hallway. I got up, opened the door, nothing. I lay back down and told myself to stop it. Stop looping audio in my head. At 9 the next morning, there was a knock. It wasn't the friendly kind. 2 deputies stood there in campaign hats that made them look older than I think they were. One of them had a notebook out. The other looked past me into my apartment like he was checking whether I kept live chickens in the tub. "You Tyler Ward?" the notebook one asked. "Yeah. You been out by Hollow Bend?" My stomach did an ungainly flip. "Last night," I said. "Just filming. Why?" "There was a call made around dawn," he said. "Gentleman walking his dog. He found a camera recording at the north gate. It's pointed at a stone with your initials on it and the date. Halloween." "That's dumb," I said, too relieved for a second. "That's like a thing kids do." The deputy didn't smile. "You want to come with us and see it?" he asked. Maya met us in the parking lot. She looked like she hadn't slept, which is fair because she hadn't. She got in my car and we followed the cruiser south, dust like a ribbon behind it. We didn't talk. Sometimes silence with someone you trust is an actual rope. I held on. At the knoll, there were 2 more vehicles and a man with a state patch standing with coffee like it was a job. The camera they'd found was mine. Not the one from the gate. The other, the compact I use for handheld. It lay on its side in the grass beyond the fence, lens pointed through the slats toward the oak and the stones under it. The little screen was flipped out. It was still recording. The counter said 11:32:17:09 and ticking. "The battery meter insisted on a life I know it didn't have when I put it in my bag." "Don't touch it," one deputy said when I took an involuntary step. The lens was aimed at a headstone I hadn't noticed the night before. It had sunk, or I'd been in a different position, or I'd been an idiot. The name didn't say my name. It said T. Ward, because a lot of names say that. The dates were from the 1890s. Below them, carved with a tool not meant for stone, were letters in a shallower bite, TW, and below that, in the same shallow bite, the date OCT 31. The letters were neat in the way letters are neat when you press very hard to make them that way. "We get kids out here," the state guy said like he was telling the wind about kids in general. "Halloween, they mess around." "Do you know when it started recording?" Maya asked. The deputy looked at the time code again. "Been running since early morning," he said. "Sun came up on it. Dog walker decided it was weird after he saw the little red light and called." "Can I play it?" I asked, and my voice did a stupid thing. "Don't touch it," he said again. "We'll bag it and tag it. You can make a statement inside with me." He walked me away from the fence like I had been bad at a party. Maya went with me. When we reached the cars, the state guy peeled off to talk to the other deputy. I leaned on my hood and tried to breathe slow. Maya looked at me. "We didn't put that there," she said. Not a question. "No," I said. I was trying to reconstruct my movements from the night before like I was editing my own body. My compact was in the bag the whole... I stopped. My hand remembered the snag going under the fence. The feeling of grabbing the strap and not checking the pocket with the camera, because I was busy not having a panic attack. The way the zipper sometimes sticks on that bag. "Tyler," Maya said gently like she saw me try to blame myself out loud. "We didn't put that there." A breeze came up the hill and went through all the dry grass at once. The oak looked like a thing with hands. Somewhere a meadowlark made a joke of a sound, and the humor of it made me want to lay down in the dirt. The deputy with the notebook came back. "We're not charging anybody with anything," he said. "There's no sign of damage besides that scratch on the stone, and we can't prove how long that's been there." "That scratch," I said, and immediately felt childish. He looked at me for a second like he wanted to ask whether I believed in ghosts. He didn't. He said, "We'd appreciate it if you didn't encourage more folks to come out here, since you're a video guy." "I'm not posting anything," I said. It came out sharper than I meant. Back in town, I put everything in a box. Not just the Hollow Bend files, everything. Mics, lights, batteries, the lav with the clip that pinches skin. I wrote "don't" on the lid like a lunatic labeling a spell. I still hear it sometimes. Not the voice, though sometimes when I'm half asleep and my phone buzzes, I think I hear "stop recording first" like a text tone. The boots are worse. They don't try to be scary. They are the sound of normal movement in a place you don't get to see. They're patient. They keep pace. Maya won't talk about Hollow Bend, which I try to respect, but sometimes we have a beer at her place and it leaks out the way things leak when you hold them too long. Once she said, "You know how it sounded most?" And I said, "How?" And she said, "Like we were late." I've thought about going back, not to film, God no. To look at the stone again in daylight and read the name properly and prove to myself it says T. Ward from the 1890s and nothing else. I picture myself going through the fence or not going through the fence and how both feel wrong. The gas station woman sometimes shows up in my head in the middle of the night saying, "Don't step on names," and then I think about how our names are the only part of us the ground can't quite eat. On bad nights, there's a loop where I dream that I'm walking up the knoll and I can hear someone ahead of me asking my questions before I ask them, in a voice that's mine but not mine, and I keep trying to catch up and I can't. And the sound of the boots is right behind me, matching my steps so perfectly. It's like I learned them from whoever's walking there. One last thing. The compact camera, the one the deputy bagged, he called me 2 days later to tell me I could pick it up. "We didn't find anything criminal," he said. "Just some audio weirdness." The tech in the back said the time codes drifted. I went down to sign for it. The state guy wasn't there. The deputy handed me the bag with the camera in it like it was a lost wallet. He looked tired. On the way out, he said, "That stone. The one with your initials. It's not new." "I didn't think it was," I said. He ran a hand along his jaw like he was deciding whether to shave after lunch. "The scratch that says the date," he said. "I mean, that didn't happen this year." "How do you know?" He shrugged. "It's weathered," he said. "Has a look." And I asked Lester. He's the grounds guy who isn't supposed to be the grounds guy out there. He made a face that said local government and then dropped it. He said he remembers Halloween scratched on that stone back in the late 90s when he was a teenager, and they used to light beers on fire. I must have looked at him too long. He held up his hands like he was doing a trick. "Could be he's wrong," he said. "He's wrong about a lot." I took the camera home and didn't play the footage. Sometimes I hold it and think I can feel heat in it like it was left in the sun too long. It probably was. It probably sat there all morning on a knoll with a view of nothing. That's the most honest thing I can say. There is probably an explanation. Some bored kids, a guy with heavy boots who knows how to step where the light doesn't fall, a name that matches mine because we aren't special, a date scratched by some other idiot on some other Halloween who wanted to scare his girlfriend, and now I'm the girlfriend. But the voice, if I hear it again, I don't know what I'll do. If it asks me to stop recording when I'm not recording, what am I supposed to stop? Talking, remembering, telling this? So I'll say it here like an apology I should have learned earlier. If anyone in Hollow Bend, anyone with a name under that ground hears this, I'm sorry. I'm stopping. I won't put a microphone in your dark to fish out a piece of you for clicks. I won't make you answer the same questions twice. I won't go back. That feels like a promise and a dare and a lie all at once. And if you read this and think that guy is a coward and a hack and I could handle it, do whatever you want. Bring your gear. Bring friends. Don't go alone. Don't go through the gate. Don't step on names. When the calm man says, "Stop recording," listen. He's not scaring you. He's telling you what the rules are. They aren't our rules. They never were. I still don't know who carved the date. I still don't know who walked where I couldn't see. I still don't know why my voice came back to me patient and wrong. I still don't know why the camera kept running like it was plugged into the hill. I know the sound of the boots matching my steps. I know the way the oak looked like it had hands. I know the gas station woman's hummingbird tattoo and the way she said don't. I know that when I close my eyes and count Mississippi, something holds its breath at 3 and I don't get to 4. And I know this, the camera the police found? It was still filming when they brought it in, even though the battery meter said 0. When they hit stop, the counter froze at 11:32:31:06, and the last thing on the tape before the screen went black was the stone with my initials and the date, and a sliver of someone's boot, not mine, stepping into the corner of the frame and then out, like a man leaving a room politely, like a man who expects you to do what you're told. I'm not the type to post on no sleep, and I'm definitely not the type to throw around the word haunted. My idea of a ghost has always been a draft under a door or a loose wire making a radio crackle. But what happened last Halloween shifted a line in my head that I didn't know was there, and every time I try to tell this out loud, I either talk too fast or stop in the middle and stare at the floor for a few seconds to find my place again. Writing it down is the only way I can make it straight. I live outside San Angelo, Texas, just a few miles past a wind-lean stretch of County Road 210. My house backs onto pasture and mesquite scrub. If you go another mile and a half past my place, the road narrows, dips, and climbs, and then you get a low ridge and the iron gate of St. Gideon's Cemetery. It used to be the parish cemetery for a church that burned in 1982. The only part of the church left is a stump of gray limestone and a bell tower with no staircase and no floor. Just a stone shaft like a chimney with the bell hanging high, black with soot and pigeon droppings. Nobody has rung that bell in 40 years. Officially. Unofficially, people will tell you that every Halloween at 3 in the morning, it tolls once. Clean, like glass. Just one note so steady and cold that you feel it in your teeth. Some folks swear the ground trembles. Teenagers park by the fence some years and try to film it. Others won't go near the place after dark. You get the usual West Texas explanations. Pranksters, meth heads, coyotes bumping a cable, wind whistle. The wind is constant out here and knows how to sing through all our broken things. The caretaker, his name is Mr. Cantu, a quiet man with a long face who keeps a coffee can of pennies for the kids who leave coins on headstones. Says every time he checks the tower after Halloween, there isn't a sign that anyone's climbed it. The door is a narrow arch locked with a rusted bar. Even if you somehow got inside, there are no stairs left. Just 2 ragged stone ledges where floors used to be. It's a 25-foot drop to the dirt and rubbish, and then another 20 feet up to the bell. The old rope is cut. You can see the frayed end through a crack in the stone, swinging like a tail when the wind hits right. So that's the background. If it sounds like local color, it is. You could grow up here and never think about it unless someone mentioned the bell, and you rolled your eyes and changed the subject. I rolled mine plenty. Then last September, I ran into a retired priest named Father Benavides at the grocery store. He was buying canned soup and a bag of cough drops. He recognized me because I did a volunteer job at St. Mary's back when he was still around. Cutting palms on Palm Sunday, setting up chairs for festivals, that kind of thing. He had that quality some older priests have. Soft voice, clear eyes, like a grandfather who never forgets your name. He'd grown thinner since I'd seen him last, with a tremor in his fingers that made the cough drops rattle like dice when he put them on the belt. We talked by the register. He mentioned he'd moved out to a little rental west of town, near the San Angelo State Park. He liked the quiet. Then he asked a question that stalled my brain mid-grocery list. Do you ever go by St. Gideon's anymore? I said now and again, which was a lie. I drove past it every couple weeks because I liked the long straightaway after the gate, where you could see for a mile. It calmed me when I had a bad day at the tire shop. He nodded like he'd already guessed. You ever hear the bell? I said, just stories. He seemed relieved by that, which I found odd. Then he said almost casually, I'd like to be there this year when it rings. The lady behind him scanned my milk. The scanner beeped in a rhythm that stuck in my head for days after. He went on, I know Mr. Cantu. He'll let me sit inside the fence. Would you come with me? It's a silly thing, but I would appreciate a driver. My night vision isn't what it was. I don't know why I said yes. Maybe because I could picture him standing alone out there in a windbreaker under a leaning cross listening to nothing. Maybe because if I went once I could put the whole Bell story to bed for myself. Maybe because I didn't want the old man to be disappointed. We planned it quietly like a kid planning to sneak out. I didn't tell my sister Rosa because she has a way of making any idea sound dumb, and I didn't want to hear the word haunted in her voice. I told Mr. Cantu we'd be around and he shrugged, said he'd leave the gate unchained. He didn't ask why. There's a dry understanding in this part of Texas. If someone wants to sit in a graveyard at night, they probably have their reasons. A few evenings before Halloween, I drove out to look at the site in daylight. St. Gideon's is flat, low, and orderly, with limestone markers and a few angel statues that look either tender or tired, depending on the slant of the sun. The grass comes in yellow waves when it hasn't rained. A line of mesquite trees marks one edge and a thin wind breaks there, trying to pretend it's shade. Beyond the fence, you get ranch land and distant water tanks and, if the day is clear, the suggestion of a far road. The bell tower sits at the far end by itself, as if it didn't want to mingle with the dead. You can smell pigeons and the chalky breath of stone when you get near it. I walked around it once, ran my hand along the block where the mortar has turned soft and dusty. On the south side, where the cut rope shows through, just 3 inches sticking into a crack, I noticed something I hadn't before. The frayed end wasn't straight where it had been severed years ago. Someone had tied the strands into a small, clumsy knot. The knot had been re-knotted. You could see old fray and new like hair retwisted by different hands. I almost called Mr. Cantu over to show him, but then I decided not to get spun up over a rope. I took a picture of the tower anyway. My phone adjusted brightness and made the sky too blue, the stone too pale. When I looked at the picture later, there was a faint shadow at the bottom of the tower, like someone standing just inside the door, but that could have been my reflection, a trick. I deleted it because I didn't want to fixate. We set the plan. Meet at my place at 1:30 a.m., drive out, set up a thermos of coffee and a cheap little tape recorder I'd borrowed from the shop for dictating work orders. I know who uses tapes anymore, but if we were going to chase an old story, it felt right to record it on something that clicked and whirred and didn't depend on a screen staying awake. Halloween Day fell on a Monday. The shop closed early. The evening was slow and odd, like time had a stone in its shoe. Kids in cheap costumes knocked on the door and I gave out candy and pretended not to watch the clock. At 1:20, I drove to the end of my driveway and saw headlights already turning in. Father Benavides was on time, sitting straight in the passenger seat like he used to sit on the altar, not stiff, just ready. He wore a black windbreaker and an old clerical collar. He had a small canvas bag and a folded blanket. When I started the truck, he put the bag on his lap and kept his hand on it like a seatbelt. I asked what was inside. He said, "A rosary." The recorder. A battery-powered candle. He smiled. "It's a bit theatrical. Humor me." We didn't talk much on the drive, which is rare for me because silence makes me fill the air. The stars were stubborn that night, stuck to the sky like salt. The wind was steady enough to tap the mesquite, but not enough to lean it. When we pulled up to the gate, the chain hung loose like Mr. Cantu promised. I pushed it aside and eased the truck onto the dirt lane that loops the graves. We parked near the mesquite so the headlights wouldn't beam on any names. I killed the engine and the quiet came down in layers, the tick of the engine cooling. A coyote far off, a squeak high in the bell tower that might have been a bird. I wanted to check my phone but didn't. We walked to the tower with the little candle. The stone looked darker at night, heavier. The candle made a coin of light on the ground and everything else stayed the same black. We set our stuff just inside the gate of the tower's door because it made a little windbreak. The lock and bar were in place. Nobody had been inside. Dried droppings, cigarette filters, a bottle cap. A folded paper with a child's scribble on it that I didn't pick up. I set the recorder on a flat rock, made sure the tape was new, hit record, and watched the red eye glow. It was 2:18 a.m. We had 42 minutes. 42 minutes sounds small when you say it. It felt large and slow inside that fence. Silence stretches in West Texas like it's trying to see how far it can go without getting caught. We sat on the blanket, our backs to the tower. The candle made Father's face look like a portrait, flat and gentle and a little tired around the mouth. He didn't seem afraid. He looked expectant, like a kid who knows a magic trick is coming and doesn't want to spoil it by guessing. Every few minutes, the wind would push enough to make the frayed rope end visible in the crack. It struck the stone, back and forth. I told myself that if the bell rang, the wind would probably be the reason. Then I told myself the wind couldn't move a clapper. Then I thought about leverage and how much surface area a bell's clapper actually has. This is how my mind works. Instead of feeling scared, I try to build a little science for it. At 2:31, a pickup rattled past on the county road. Headlights slid along the fence and died. I figured it was a rancher checking things. At 2:40, a pair of teens parked by the gate and giggled and dared each other to climb. One of them shushed the other and said, "We can't. My cousin said the old man who runs it keeps a shotgun." The other said, "It's Halloween, he's probably asleep." They pushed the chain and it clinked. Then Father cleared his throat, soft, and the sound made both of them jump. One of them said, "Sorry," into the dark, and they left. The chain clinked again. I heard them run. At 2:47, a gust walked through the mesquite and made the whole fence hum like a tuning fork. The hum found a frequency in the tower, low, patient, almost like someone singing under their breath. I stood up to see if the rope was knocking hard. Father stayed seated. He was listening, really listening. A coyote yipped twice. Then everything reset back to quiet, like a pond surface after a thrown rock. At 2:52, I realized I could hear a sound that wasn't wind or animals. It was a small, dry, rhythmic tap from inside the tower, not like a bird foot, more like a fingertip on stone. The tap had a pattern to it, 2 quick, 1 slow. 2 quick, 1 slow. I held my breath to isolate it and it kept going, polite as a neighbor knocking on a door. I leaned near the barred opening and peered into the tower's dark. The candle didn't push light that far. I could smell dust and something sour like old rain caught in rock. When I pulled back, I could feel grit on my lips. At 2:56, Father took the rosary out of his bag. "I won't preach," he told me, and he said it in a way that made me ashamed for thinking he might. He held the beads like an anchor instead of like an object. His hands weren't steady. The tap changed to a faint scrape, as if someone had moved closer to the door inside, and then... I don't know how to explain this without sounding like I'm exaggerating. The scrape felt like it was on my left, then directly behind my right shoulder, then back inside the tower where it had started. I turned fast enough to make the candle flicker, and when it flickered, the shadow of the bar on the tower door jumped like a hand. I told myself I was hearing mice. Mice are a basic truth of old stone. At 2:58, the little recorder on the rock ticked louder. It didn't change volume. I was just more aware of the mechanism in that moment, because everything else got unnaturally still. The leaves stopped whispering. The low hum from the fence died. Even the ticks of engine metal cooling felt like they took a break. The quiet was so complete I could hear my heart in my ears, and it made me a little sick. Father said, very low, "If it rings, do not try to go inside." I said I won't, because it was obvious. There was nowhere to go inside to. A stone shaft, a drop, broken wood, but I said it anyway because it seemed to matter to him that I said it out loud. At 2:59, we heard footsteps in the tower. That's what they were. I could lie to myself and call it falling pebbles or an animal. But it was a person's feet pacing on an invisible floor that couldn't exist. Soft, slow, back and forth, weight, heel and toe. A careful turn. Another slow pass. It was the sound a child makes when they're reciting something and walking in small measured lines to memorize it. I looked over and saw Father's eyes change. Widen, not fright exactly. Recognition. The way your face shifts when you hear a familiar voice on the radio after a long time. The footsteps stopped. The little tapping returned for 3 beats and then stopped too. Like a metronome someone reached out to still. The clapper inside the bell moved. There's a particular scrape when iron moves against iron even gently. It has a syllable to it like ruh. The bell made that sound, the pre-sound before a ring, and my whole back tightened waiting for the strike. It didn't come. Instead, the clapper slid back to center with a tiny rebound. Rake. Then, a full second later, with no wind, no visible cause, it swung forward again and struck the inside of the bell one time. If you've only ever heard bells in movies or on phones, you might think it was going to be a big gong. It wasn't, it was honest and contained. The note rose into the tower and slid down the stone and entered the ground. I felt it in my feet and in my teeth. It didn't echo. It settled like a coin coming to rest on a table. The sound lasted longer than it should have, and it didn't even seem to be just sound. It felt like a pressure that moved through me and went on into the earth and kept traveling until it found something it recognized. The second after the note finished, a little boy's voice whispered at the door. I don't know how old. 5, 7? You can tell by a child's breath how small their lungs are. That was the scale of this voice. It whispered with the certainty of kids who are always overheard whispering in church pews. It said, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." And then it kept going, and it wasn't any child's confession. It was Father's. I wouldn't have known it was his if he hadn't gone still like a person hearing their own name in a crowded room. He didn't try to stop the voice. He didn't cross himself. He didn't pray out loud. He put his hands in his lap and he listened to the whole thing like a man who had been waiting for a knock he knew would come. The voice spoke quickly, like someone copying from memory, not a page. It mentioned a name, Miguel. It mentioned a night in 1982 when there was a fire at St. Gideon's. This part is public. The church did burn, and a boy who was supposed to be in the rectory because his mother cleaned there on Saturdays. He wasn't there that night. He snuck to the bell tower with another kid to show how he could climb. This child voice described the way the boards are when you're little. Floorboards that feel like a story bridge. A rope that gives and takes with your weight. A door that doesn't latch if you push with your shoulder and hold your breath at the same time. The voice said, and I should have checked the tower myself. I thought someone else had. I said I would, but I didn't. I was tired. I told myself I had prayed over the place and prayer would be enough. I told myself that if any boy climbed, the worst he would get is a splinter. He didn't say it like that exactly. He said it in the short rhythm of a man in a booth who knows what words fit. I won't write the rest of his confession out here because it wasn't my sin, and I don't have the right to polish it into something digestible. I'll just say the child's whisper matched the timbre and the pauses of Father's voice more faithfully than a tape recorder could, and it did it in a tone that was not accusatory. It was the steady tone of a memory being put in order. I don't know if you've ever listened to someone you respect tell you the worst thing they think about themselves. There's a second where you want to say no, don't, because you want to preserve your image of them, and then another second where you want to help carry it, and then another when you realize that the carrying isn't your job. That's how it felt to sit there and hear this voice speak Father's private words back at him. With that small, breathy patience. The whisper went on for maybe a minute. It paused once, like a child checking if a grown-up was listening. The pause made the night look different to me. The mesquite didn't look like trees. They looked like bent people. The headstones became shoulders of people kneeling. Even the fence wires looked like lines on a palm. The candle flame made the bar on the tower door draw a cross on the ground that didn't match where I thought the bar should throw the shadow. When the whisper finished, there was a longer pause, and then in that same small voice, "Do you understand?" Father said clearly, "I do." The voice said, "Say you're sorry again." Father said, "I am sorry," and he wasn't reading the answer. He said it like it had never been said correctly before. Then something softer that I couldn't hear. The wind hadn't picked up, but the quiet seemed to change shape, like the dark was listening too. "Okay," the voice said. It sounded like a kid done with homework. Then came the footsteps again. Not pacing, as if someone had stepped away from the door to the center of a room that didn't exist. 5-6 steps light, a short hop, the way kids do when they go down a single stair. Then nothing. Then a rustle high in the tower where the pigeons nest. Then absolutely nothing. I realized I had been standing. When did I stand up? With my hand on the cold bar over the door. My fingers hurt from squeezing it. I let go and my palm had a line engraved in it that stayed for minutes after. Father was still on the blanket. He looked older than when we arrived. And then in the candlelight he looked younger, and that was more disconcerting. We didn't talk. I shut off the recorder because the sound of its little motor suddenly felt obnoxious. It clicked as it stopped, and the click made me flinch like a door slam. Father reached into his bag and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. I thought it might be a prayer. It was a photocopy of a parish bulletin from 1982, with the names of people who had died in the fire listed on the back. One of the names was Miguel R., or age 12. I didn't have to know the rest to sense that the story we'd just brushed against was a bruise that had never stopped aching. We stayed until a chalk line of dawn started to draw itself behind the mesquite. The teenagers didn't come back. No rancher trucks passed. Just the wind and the dry grass again, and one hawk that woke up before the others and rose from somewhere beyond the fence like a thought leaving a dream. When we packed up, I checked the base of the tower because I needed to see something human. There were small scuffs in the powder at the threshold that hadn't been there earlier. They were not prints. They were more like places where dust had lifted and made tiny comma shapes. I told myself it was the wind. I didn't check the rope. I didn't want to see the knot again and wonder who had tied it or when. Back at the truck, Father asked if I could drop him at St. Mary's instead of his rental. It was still early. The office wouldn't be open, but the courtyard has benches and he liked the morning there. He was polite about it. He said it like a favor to ask, not like a test. I drove him without turning on the radio. At the church, he thanked me, hand on the bag again. He said, "You don't need to keep the tape." His voice had a roughness to it that sounded like he'd been crying, though I hadn't seen him cry. I said I was going to give it to you anyway. I tried to hand him the recorder. He didn't take it. Instead, he said, "Put it in the sacristy on the shelf where the purificators are. Tell them I left a note. I said I would." He got out, closed the door carefully, and stood there a second. Then he leaned down at the window like he remembered something he'd almost forgotten. "Thank you for not trying to see who was speaking." I didn't know what to do with that, so I nodded. He went inside the courtyard gate and sat on a bench, hands on his bag, the way old men sit in plazas and watch the morning fill up. I drove around to the side entrance and used the Dropbox key they keep for volunteers.
Inside the sacristy, I put the tape recorder where he said.
The room smelled of old polish and lilies. I slid the power button as a reflex to make sure it was off and the tape wasn't running. The red light was off. The little counter read Dobero Dyer like it had reset. I shrugged and set it down. By the time I walked back around, Father was no longer on the bench. This is the part where I wish I could tell you something clean, like he went home and called me later and said thank you, or we never spoke again and he died in his sleep. Because those kinds of endings make sense to people. The truth is muddier. I didn't see him that day or the next. I went to his rental after a week and knocked. Nobody answered. His car wasn't there. I asked at the parish office and they said he had taken a few days to visit a cousin in Del Rio. Then another week, and they said they hadn't heard. Then they said there was mail for him if I wanted to take it. I said no. I didn't want any piece of anyone's explanation. 2 days after Halloween, Mr. Cantu called me and said, "You left a recorder at the church?" His tone was cautious, like he was trying not to step on anything sharp in the dark. I told him what Father had asked. He said, "Come look." I asked him to tell me over the phone. He said, "Come look," again, and this time I heard worry. He had the recorder on his office desk, the old kind of parish office with a swivel chair that squeaks and an analog clock that thinks it's still 1999. The recorder was plugged into the wall because the battery died on him earlier. He hit play. It clicked word and began to play me the last 5 minutes from Halloween morning. The wind easing, the hush, the scrape, and the bell. You could hear the footsteps. The whisper came next and I felt sick in my shoulders, like when you almost drop a heavy box. The whisper was clear, every single word. Then something we hadn't heard in the moment began to layer under the whisper. So quietly I could have missed it if Mr. Cantu hadn't pointed, like pointing at a bird so you see which branch. It was a second voice farther away, same words but not doubled like an echo. It was Father's voice answering the whisper in an almost perfect unison, a shade out of sync like a round. He wasn't loud, and I think we hadn't noticed because we were inside that blank, impossible quiet where small sounds get lost. But on the tape you could hear him, the sighs, the old habit in the way he framed each sentence, every "I should have" and "I am sorry." Then when the whisper asked, "Do you understand?" you could hear him say, "I do." There was a pause where you could hear the tape motor. Then his voice softer. Please forgive me. I have been living with a door open in my head since that night. Close it if you can, close it. I am sorry." The whisper said, "Okay." After that, the tape kept running. There were clicks of us moving, a low cough, maybe mine, wind scraping the tower. Then a new sound, quiet at first, building. It was Father's voice again, but there was no other voice with it now. He wasn't in the moment anymore. He was somewhere else. He was asking forgiveness again, in a loop, each time a little different, each time a little more like a man who realizes he can finally say the thing he needs to say without someone stopping him. Forgive me, and then, I'm sorry for not checking, and then, I should have gone, and then, I'm so sorry, and then, forgive me, over and over. For how long, I don't know. We stopped the tape at 37 minutes and there were still words left, thin in the mechanism, like a voice pressed into plastic. Mr. Cantu said he had let it run that way in the sacristy while he did other tasks, and it kept going, past the end of the physical tape, clicking and playing without playing. as if the machine thought there was still something to unspool. We stood there like men staring at a small fire and arguing quietly if we should throw dirt on it or water. Then the recorder clicked by itself and the red light turned on. I didn't touch it. It was still plugged into the wall, but the switch was in the off position. The little counter didn't move. There was no tape in the door, but the speaker began to hiss with a low hiss that had a pattern, and under the hiss, very faint, like someone speaking through a pillow, I heard Father's voice say, "Please forgive me." One more time, I unplugged it. The hiss kept hissing for a good 3 seconds after the plug was out, which I know electronics can do because of stored charge, but it felt like a breath that took too long to leave. We took the recorder to the bell tower that afternoon because Mr. Cantu had the thought that maybe the tape belonged there now. He set it on the same flat rock. We stood for a minute and listened to the normal sounds: wind, fence, a pair of grackles swearing at each other. He said, "Do you think he's okay?" He didn't say dead, he didn't have to. Out here people go and either you see them again or you don't. I said, "I think he wanted to be heard by someone who could tell him okay." Mr. Cantu said, "Who was the someone?" I said, "We heard a child." He looked at me like I'd said the wrong thing. "We heard his own words," he said. "Sometimes that's worse." We left the recorder. The next morning when Mr. Cantu opened the gate, the recorder had nothing in it. No tape, no batteries. The case was empty, but when he held it, it had weight like it was full. He shook it gently and it made a dry rattle like seeds in a pod. He put it back on the rock. It's still there as far as I know. People who go out to leave pennies say sometimes, if the wind is still and the fence hums just right, you can hear an old man's voice ask a question no one can answer. They say the bell tower is silent, which is true. The bell hasn't rung since we were there, not once. But at 3 a.m. on Halloween this year, someone posted a video to a neighborhood group of St. Gideons in the moonlight with the tower standing like a black knuckle. There was no sound except wind and the person's shoes on gravel, and one faint whisper from the other side of the camera. Do you understand? I don't go to St. Gideon's at night anymore. That's not fear, it's manners. Some doors once closed ought to stay closed, and I have no business knocking on them again just to prove I know where they are. If this story scares you, it shouldn't. It should make you feel the way I do when I wake around 3 and listen for distant trucks on the highway or for coyotes or for the refrigerator clicking on. It should make you feel like the night is not empty, but full of people resting and pacing and whispering to themselves the way we all do when no one is listening. If you happen to hear a bell in that quiet, remember it doesn't always mean someone wants you to come. Sometimes it means someone on the other side is finally ready to leave. I only have one last piece. A week ago, I found something under my doormat that looked like trash until I picked it up. It was a tangle of old rope threads, knotted and re-knotted until the knot looked like a small chewed-up heart. It smelled like stone dust. I don't know who left it there or why. I carried it to the edge of my property as the sun went down and put it on the fence post that faces the road to St. Gideon's, where the wind could decide what to do with it. When I let it go, it felt weightless. I stood there and I looked down County Road 210 with the mesquite on both sides, making a low hallway and the sky the color of old postcards. And I listened for a bell that didn't ring, and I thought I heard, just for a second, a child's footsteps somewhere behind me, turning, counting, practicing the path to the center of a room only he could see. Then it was just wind again, like the end of a story when the tape runs out and the machine still thinks there's more to say.